Hello. Can everybody hear me? What's up, Drac? Thanks for coming.
What's up, Drac? Thanks for coming.
Oh, got
What's up,
my
Drac?
playback.
Thanks for coming.
Oh,
What's
got
up, Drac?
my. Why did that go through like 30 times? Holy crap. That was creepy. So, how's everybody doing tonight? Did you hear that? It was like kept going back through my mic like over and over again. It would have been never ending. Because I usually keep like the actual stream on as well. So I can see if it messes up. Yeah, I know you're a bit nosebleedy there, forewarnings. All right. So I'm gonna wait. Because I got something I need to say. And I'm gonna wait till we get more people here tonight. Well, don't be sorry, it's not your fault. So I suppose I will just start reading a story. This is a creepypasta under Creepypasta Indexer. It's called Think Not of the Morrow. It's been nearly 20 years since I had a conversation that would change my life. 20 years since that boy came into my office and told me perhaps the most fantastical story I would hear all my life. A story that stuck in my mind so clearly all of these years. Of course, I didn't believe it then, but now, after so many years, after the life that I've lived since that conversation, I can't help but to think back on that day with guilt and regret, and now finally fear. I was a headmaster then at a primary school in Northamptonshire, about 6 years away from retiring. A boy called Chris was sent into my office for locking two other students in the tech cupboard, a room where we kept equipment for the science lessons taught at school. I knew him. He was a good student. He'd once shared some work in a school assembly. He had always seemed to be he had always seemed to me quite bright and a little shy. Not so that day. He was making a great fuss, I remember, about being sent to me. Hey, what up, Voice of Nightmares? Thanks for coming. Everybody, please like and subscribe if you're not. I think everyone's here is probably subscribed, though. And share. Please share it on Twitter or Facebook or whatever else you may or may not use, so we can see if more people can come in here. We can get some more friends. Thank you, Victoria Von Vamp. It's not right. This isn't right, he repeated over and over as Judy, his teacher, practically carried him in. She explained the situation to me and then left to go back to her class. I remember I sat silently, staring at him from behind my desk, the stern look I reserve for such situations across my face. Again and again he said it. This isn't right. It's not supposed to be like this. Hey, Haley. He looked odd, panicked, and upset, though not in the way one would expect a 10-year-old to be on being sent to the headmaster's office. His eyes darted back and forth as my own have many times when I burst into rapid thought. Eventually, I spoke over him. Christopher, this is very disappointing. I always used the full first name if I was giving a child a telling off. It sounds so much more serious. He took little notice and carried on repeating those same words, glancing this way and that, looking utterly confused. Christopher! Christopher, look at me when I'm speaking, Christopher! I remember I raised my voice almost to a shout as I said his name the last time, something I rarely did. His eyes snapped onto mine as he fell silent. I expected to see them gloss over. It's a dreadful thing to make a child cry, and so I began again in a calmer tone. It's disappointing to have you sent. Look, something's gone wrong somewhere. This isn't supposed to happen like this. I was shocked to be interrupted, but what startled me, what left me speechless for those few moments as he carried on, was the way he spoke. His voice was that of a young boy, to be sure, but as if under the control of someone far older. His enunciation was clear and precise, his tone somehow mature and serious. I just need to think for a moment. I can't sort this out. I need to think. His eyes went back to their darting to and fro. I had found my voice by now. I expect you to listen when I'm talking to you, young man. Do not interrupt me when I am speaking. His eyes fixed onto my own again, and he spoke before I could continue. Sure, okay. Look, just give me 5 minutes to talk, okay? 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. I'm not sure what made me do it. Perhaps it was just the peculiarity in the whole situation so far. I sat back in my chair, took the pipe out of my top drawer, and began to fill its end with tobacco. For one was still allowed to smoke indoors at this point in Britain. 5 minutes. I lit the pipe and popped it into my mouth, gesturing that he sit down in a chair next to my desk, which he did, and I let him speak. Okay, I've been here before. Well, not in this situation, but at this school, at this time. I've lived through this before. Have you ever seen the film Groundhog Day? I shook my head. Okay, well, have you ever thought about going back in time, back to an earlier point, but as you are now, traveling back to redo some of your life with the knowledge you have now? Well, that's what happened to me, only I can't control it. I can't stop it. He sat back a little further on the chair now. His face became grim as he looked out of a window across the room. I lived life normally until my 13th birthday. And then I wake up a 4-year-old back in the house I haven't lived in for 24 years. It sounds great, being young again, getting to go back and do things better, but it's a nightmare. The first time through, I showed off. I'd been a doctor of philosophy before I went back. I could do advanced mathematics, quote Shakespeare, play the piano. It was fun. I was a prodigy, but all the attention I got from me got taken away from my younger brother. He wasn't the same brother I'd known before. And what was worse, for the first time, I saw his eyes become glazed and that piercing voice began to tremble. With so much time and effort put into me, my parents never had any more children. I had another brother and sister before, and suddenly they didn't exist. And it was because of me. I tried to tell people about what was going on, but it's a hard thing to prove. I'd tell them sports results that hadn't yet happened, warn them of natural disasters. When it became apparent that my predictions were right, I was taken off to study, drugged in a white-walled room. You can't imagine how long 20 years can take in a padded cell. He went silent for a moment, staring blankly out the window. Then his eyes came back to me. Thank you, Voice of Nightmares. Hey, Boogeyman. April, thanks for coming, you two. Sinatra, good to see you, man. But it happened again. I woke up one morning in my parents' house, 26 years younger. That second time around, my parents had 2 more children, but they weren't the brother and sister I should have had. They were different, and the others were gone. Now, if I try to get the first ones back, I'm writing the other 2 kids out of existence. You can't imagine the guilt. He stood up then and walked over to look at me over the desk, his head only just reaching over so it could see me. Now I need your help. This is my 12th time. I think if I can make it right, if I can keep everything the way it was supposed to be, maybe it'll go on. Maybe I won't have to keep doing this. I wasn't supposed to be sent here. You aren't supposed to talk to my mother about this. Look. He grabbed a piece of paper and a pen and began scribbling something down. He handed it over for a moment. I forget what he had written exactly. Something extremely complex, looking mathematical proof. No 10-year-old should know this stuff. He grabbed another sheet and began furiously writing again. Names, dates, events. He passed it to me. I know this sounds crazy now, but just look. These are all things yet to come. You'll see. Take it. Bet on the results. Make some money, please. Don't interfere now or again. You aren't supposed to be involved in this. I remember only a little of the conversation after that. It was ridiculous. What he was saying, how could I possibly believe it? I told him to stop talking such nonsense and sent him back to his class. I called his mother into my office when she came to collect him and told her about his misbehaving and this strange outburst. I kept his list, though. I'm not sure why I did it, but I kept it, safely filed away in my study at home. Mandy, thanks. I read in a paper a few years later that Chris had killed himself around the time he told me his second brother should be born. I learned later that his mother had miscarried. I worry now whether that was my doing. Maybe if I'd done as he asked, things would have gone differently. Who knows what effect that conversation had on her. It is now the afternoon of July 21st, 2017, the day before Chris would be due to turn 30. Everything on the list that boy furiously scribbled down that day has happened. World Cup victories, hurricanes, the bombings of the Twin Towers over the U.S., everything just as he wrote it. But now my thoughts turn to tomorrow. What happens to me? What happens to my daughter, to my grandchildren? If everything goes back so we can live through it again, where do we go? Do we carry on without them? Or will we just never wake up, just disappear? I've lived a long life and I've done great many things, but none haunt me so much as that conversation. And I've never felt as much dread as I do today. If we really do start over, I hope I listen the next time through. Oh, it says here the original author of this was Pumpkin von Bandersnatch. Hey, okay. How you doing? Yeah, I don't look like my voice. Oh, what does my voice look like? I don't know what my voice looks like. All right, everybody, please like and share and get the word out and all that good fancy stuff. More Atlas Cooper. I should have like long hair, a couple of snakes around me. I'm glad you're here, though. This is the first time you've come to one of my live streams, isn't it? Well, hang out a bit. I do have something to say, though. A member of the horror community passed away. Hey, what's up, Johnny? Spades of Death passed away. He was struggling with depression. And so I just want to pay some respects to him. I didn't know him very well, but he was part of the Horror Hive. And I collabed with him and stuff like that. But he was part of the Horror Hive and he was part of the horror community. So you know what? I'm gonna find his channel real quick. And I'm going to link his channel. And hopefully you guys can give it a sub, check it out, because that really sucks that he's no longer with us. That's his channel right there. If you guys could support it. Johnny, I seen your video earlier. It was a very nice video. I wish I would have had a chance to get to know him better. Unfortunately, I won't have that chance now. But he was one of the co-owners of the Horror Hive, which are the people that started my narrating. So, you know, I still got a lot of respect for the guy. So that really sucks. Conrad's no longer in the Horror Hive. And he wasn't an owner of the Horror Hive either. But yes, so pay some respects to Spades of Death. That it's very unfortunate that he's passed away. Yeah. But I will read another story. I don't want to bring Murder Monday down. I just thought that I should, you know, say something. And so I'll find another story to read. This one is called The aforementioned day one, I've called myself paranoid for quite some time because of the little things that put me on edge. I can't stay in the dark. Even when my eyes focus, I can feel the gaze of some night dweller following me as I tiptoed to stay unheard and scanned with my pathetic, nearsighted eyes. I can feel something hidden in the dark that must be there since I can't see it. I can't stand the silence either. You'd think the opposite would be true, since at least the silence I can hear if something's coming. Not someone, something. But it's not all. I can feel myself shifting and tense, and as I strain to pick up sound, as if the silence is just inviting a sound that doesn't belong, as if it's inviting something to happen, for something to do something. I sleep with the television on, and it solves both sources of this indistinct paranoia. But now I don't think it's all paranoia. Lately, I've been hearing noises around the house, and sometimes when I look around, I notice things are knocked over or missing or just moved around. Once or twice, I've heard something moving around just before I turn to find nothing. I've been having nightmares, and the nightmare is a creature I've never seen in even the darkest of folklores. Tells me I should be afraid, because I will be like it soon. Day 5. This morning, in the first moments of waking, I saw something. It was just like that creature from my nightmares. I told myself I was still in those moments of dreaming, but I'm not sure I believe myself. I think it touched me. I think it had claws. Day 6. I saw it again, and this time I couldn't deny I was awake. I went to get a drink, and I was in the hall, just outside the barrier of light from my room. It was pale, too pale. It was nearly white despite its human-like skin, and its eyes were staringly big and black, or startlingly big and black, faintly reflecting the light. Its pale skin was pulled tight across its bony frame, and its veins were visible, as if the skin were too thin. It had huge claws. It scared me to know they had touched me. They were like razors, and the largest 3 were a foot long, the other on the bend of its wrist, maybe an inch. It was the same color as mine. They were the same color as mine. Okay. All this seemed captured like a photograph, and the second it stared at me with its 2 big eyes, as if surprised it was noticed, before it darted into the dark of the hall just past the corner and it peeked around. I didn't go to drink. Day 7. I think it left the house, but I didn't sleep for fear of waking to feel its claws touch me again. I can't stop thinking about them. They look like they're made of the same material as my own. So how did they look so sharp? Day 8. I was wrong. When I woke up, it was watching me sleep, awkwardly sitting in the corner diagonal from me. No, not I woke up. It woke me up. I heard it breathing. It was rattling sound like a sick animal, toneless, emotionless, flat. I saw all of it. Its hind legs are much shorter than its front legs, and I remember my first thought was, how can it walk on all fours with them so mismatched? I could see its ribs. It's so bony. It has no muscle tone. It has no features of any gender. I could tell from how it crouched or sat or whatever it was doing with its short hind legs. It had claws on its feet, the same as its hands, 3 toes and 1 short claw. I realized its face is too long and it's bald. It has a nose like a skeleton. It let me look at it. I think it liked that I looked at it, as its horrifyingly pale and emaciated form. It let me finish, and it started back like it was doing the same thing. Or stared back like it was doing the same thing, like it was taking in every detail. We finished at the same time, and it smiled before it walked away on all fours, slowly, as if it were letting me see how it walked. Like it knew I was curious. It looked at me the whole time. It didn't blink. I don't think it can. Oh, God, that stare. Day 9. Hey, what's up, Scary Milk? Thanks for coming by. Hey, Meow. Thanks for stopping in. Day 9. It was in the corner again this morning. It didn't move when I saw it, even though I didn't want to observe it again. It stared at me for over an hour before I realized it was waiting for me to get up. I didn't want to get up. I pulled the covers closer and moved closer to the wall, but I don't think it liked that. It reached a long forearm out and hooked a claw into the covers and tore them away from me with a flick of its wrist. I don't know how it did it. It had no muscles, but it was so strong. The speed it pulled, it gave me a rug burn on my hands where I had grabbed the covers. It waited and left the covers by the bed. It watched me. It watched me until I finally moved to the edge of the bed. It didn't react, but somehow I felt like it lit up. When I finally managed to stand on quivering legs, it stared at me. It stared from head to foot and then smiled and left. I wanted to see how I looked standing. It wanted to see all of me. I don't know how it stared. No, I don't like how it stared. I'm sorry. Day 10. I think it likes that corner. It was there again this morning. This time I didn't feel as afraid to stand, thinking it would make it leave, but it didn't. It kept staring as if expecting me to do something. We stared at each other for a long time before I think it got impatient. It came towards me, and I moved towards the end of my bed away from it by pure instinct. Instead of chasing me, it seemed pleased, but I was in its way. I was frozen in fear in front of the doorway, which was just past the end of my bed, so it moved past me, able to make it in the space until it had gotten to its wider hind legs. They bumped into me as it pushed me aside and into the bed with unexpected force. Its skin is smooth and slightly slimy. I curled there, shaking for some time. Day 11. It wasn't there today. A simple comfort. However, as I got dressed, I caught it spying on me. I froze with one arm out of its sleeve and with my pants half up. It kept staring. I tried to ignore it and finish dressing. When I looked back to the door, worried it was already gone. I feel like it has some kind of plan. The fact it's intelligent enough to plan makes me nervous. Day 12. It wasn't in the corner again, though I dressed slowly to keep an eye out for it. I almost pray it got what it wanted from watching and left. Fortunately, I found it waiting expectantly like a pet. I fled to my room, and it followed me. No, chased me, and was suddenly ahead of me, blocking my path and staring at me with its big eyes, and showed no emotion, though I knew it was angry. I went to the kitchen, and I put a raw steak on a plate. It smacked it away into the wall where the meat hit with a sickening splat, while the plate shattered, and I flinched as it continued to look at me, though it now seemed disappointed in me for getting its desire wrong. Now tentative, I got out the orange juice and poured a cup, though when I went to offer it, it made a low noise, the first I had ever heard, and although it had no tone, I somehow realized it was female. She stared at me with the cup until I finally took a timid sip, and she sat there as if pleased. I made a toast and eggs. She wanted none of it, only for me to eat. Once I finished, she got up and left. I wonder if she's trying to fatten me up. Day 13. She was getting progressively further into my life. Today I didn't see her until after breakfast. I went to go to the bathroom, and she was suddenly at my heels, her claws barely missing my ankles as it crept behind me. I kept at a steady pace until I was a step or two from the bathroom before I rushed in and slammed the door, locking it. I smiled until I sat on the toilet, and there was a roar, and all 6 of her big claws tore a hole in the door, letting her in. She sat there with a smile as if triumphant. I cried as she watched me, and as usual, she left once I was done. What's up, Kit Bina? Thanks for coming. Day 14. She followed me out today. I went through my home routine without any sign of her. Joyous as I went along my way to school until I heard it, her breathing. I don't know how, but I heard it. I looked around in fright and saw her dark eyes watching me from the shadows, and when I stopped, she made that low noise of disapproval. I don't know how, but I heard it, and my feet began to move of their own will to school. She has me trained. She watched me from the shadows from what shadows she could find, and I think she was there in the classroom. Day 15. I'm starting to understand how she works. I kept an eye out for her all day until school was out, but there was no sign of her. When I got home, as expected, she was waiting for me. She seemed glad that I expected her and waited just as expectantly for me to continue along my routine to the next task, homework. She sat by my desk and watched me. I almost felt comforted as I understood what she wants now. I'm not sure I like that I'm comforted. Day 19. Oh, did it go glitchy again? Can you guys still hear me and stuff though? Or did it cut out the audio too? Okay. Day 19. I was right. She followed me throughout the rest of my daily routine, step at a time, until I went to bed. I've started to wonder what she does when she's not watching me. I think she's studying me. I wonder if she's somehow compiling it. I realize that thought means I believe she's gathering information on me for other creatures. I slept uneasy. Day 20. She's gone. I didn't see her even after I went to bed. I don't like that. I'm worried. Day 23. Still no sign of her. Only these entries and the hole in my bathroom door convinced me that she was actually real, or I'm going crazy. At this point, the latter is starting to seem more reasonable. Devil Jack, what's up, dude? Day 24. I called someone to fix the door. I'm not sure why I hadn't after she had done it anyways, or even after she had finished observing my cleaning ritual. They said it would take 3 days. Day 25. The man asked a lot of questions about the door hole, saying it looked like someone had taken a hatchet to it. He asked me why the hole was so low and such an odd size. I lied and he gave me a weird look. I told the truth and he gave me a weirder one. When I insisted it was the truth, he threatened me. I'll be getting someone new to fix the door. Day 26. I'm still shaking. She's back, but something's different about her. I woke up and found her mouth around my head, a frightening feat, and I saw all of the razor sharp teeth going from the entrance down her throat. My first thought was that she'd come to kill me. My second was to wonder if I was her food. My third, how those teeth functioned in her throat. She eased her mouth off me gently, but a tooth nicked my nose. It barely touched me, but it was a horrible gash. It bled hard. She licked it, and her tongue felt like a cat's. The cut stopped. It still hurts. She seemed satisfied by my frightened appearance and left abruptly. At night, as I watched the news, the man who came to fix my door was found killed in his apartment with what they suspect was a hatchet. She's warning me. Day 20, Day 27. I woke up to her again, this time on top of me. She's light, but her bones dug into me to awaken me. She stared at me with a smile as I shook and showed me her teeth again. I managed to whisper and she retreated to her corner. Or I managed to whimper and she retreated to her corner. Day 31. She doesn't leave me alone now. I learned she doesn't sleep. I feel her eyes on me wherever I go. Day 33. I pet a cat on the street on the way home from school yesterday. Today it was gutted on my kitchen table. She grinned when I threw up. Day 34. She was missing for a spell today, and I noticed the closet door open. I felt compelled to look in, and I realized that's where she's been living. There's a strong smell of death. I'm getting more and more frightened. Day 37. For the first time in a long time, she was gone. I spent time with friends. I enjoyed myself. I kissed my boyfriend and hugged him, but said nothing of why we haven't spent time together. Day 38. She cut off his arm. It was in my bed, positioned as if it was caressing me. I stayed home. Day 44. I left the house for the first time in days to see him. He was out of the hospital. He hadn't spoken to anyone. His first words in days were, "She said my property," before he fainted. Day 47. She became engorged. She leaks. She leaks a foul-smelling liquid that smells like rotting meat. I'm not sure what she's feeding on. Day 50. She spoke to me. She said I can no longer leave. Day 54. I've run out of food. She saw I didn't eat and brought me something. It was my friend's dog. Day 63. I tried to go get food and she attacked me. I have 3 puncture marks on my leg from where she pulled me back inside. I ate the dog. Day 68. I cry a lot. I can't make myself leave my bed. The puncture marks are infected. Day 69. I left the bed to clean the punctures. I'll live. I wish I hadn't cleaned them, but she watched me the whole time. Day 71. I read a book and laughed. She got thinner. Day 72. I smiled. She seemed upset. It took a while to realize the smell of her was missing. Day 77. I know how to kill it. Day 84. I'm finally free. After a week's preparation, I managed to approach her while she was moving to the next room and hugged her. Her skin slick and greasy from that horrible liquid. She screeched and tried to attack, but I was on her back, holding on tight and refused to give in to fear and give her strength. She ran, and I nearly slipped from her speed and that coating, the smell beginning to make me dizzy. But I swallowed the bile rising up to my throat and kissed her bald head. Feeling the veins pulse madly, she buckled with a gurgling noise. When I got up, those eyes were white, and she didn't follow me. She's finally dead. Day 85. The body was gone. I find I don't care why, as long as it's gone. Day 87. I woke up to find those claws touching me and immediately hugged the source. A voice laughed. It was male. We already know about you. That won't work twice. I can't stop crying. Day 189. They sent me to my first house. The source is a young boy. He wet himself when my claws touched him in his waking hours. It was wonderful. The original author is Caitlin C. So what's up, everybody? Johnny, man, where have you been, bro? Yeah, rest in peace to Mr. Ramsey's pet. That's horrible, too. Yeah, that really sucks. So how's everybody doing tonight, despite all the bad news? Yeah, Jag, Mr. Ramsey's pet passed away. So come on, how's everybody doing? Fandamtastic. Or Fandamtastic. Polo. Let me look, Mandy. It was a little bit chilly today. It says that it is in the 50, like 51 or so right now. So it's not that bad. I'm doing all right today. I'm not doing too bad. I didn't say YOLO. I said polo. No, polo. Because Haley said Marco to me. Alrighty, I will get to read the next story. And again, please like, subscribe if you're not subscribed, and share this. Let's try to get some new people in here and see if we can get some new friends in here, huh? And support each other. So check out each other's channels, please. And if any of you are not subbed to each other, please check each other out. Support one another. Thank you, Devil Jack. All right, we'll find another story. If any of you guys have a story that you'd like me to read, like your favorite creepypasta or anything like that, or a story you've written yourself, send me a link either on Twitter or send me a link on Discord if you have that. And that would be awesome, and I would be glad to read your favorite stories. I'll say YOLO if I want to say YOLO. Paul Bunyan? I've never heard. Blue, we have some trees to cut down. All right, I'm going to find another. I don't think I've read this one. This one is called String Theory. Have you ever had an experience that suggested someone else was in your house and just thought, I don't want to know, and left it? Sometimes fear of the unknown just seems like the preferable option than facing the real, concrete danger. Normally, it's nothing, though. One time, the beep function on my wireless house phone went off. When I was the only one home, it could only be called from the living room. Another time, I swear someone took some change from my desk. They're all probably just slightly disconcerting tricks of the memory. But what would you do when something truly suggestive happens? Would you run or just ignore it like I did? Last Monday was a normal day. I got up, brushed my teeth, changed into some school clothes. All little parts of my morning ritual. It seemed like it would be another totally unnoteworthy day until I saw the strings. There were 3 or 4 thick twine strings in my room. They crisscrossed between the walls around my bed, one attached to the door. No way I would have missed them before. I should have tripped over them. They were tied to pins on the walls, which had also not existed before 10 seconds ago. Nobody could have been in my room while I was in it, let alone set this up. It was early and my brain wasn't processing correctly. I simply discredited the sight, untied the strings, and left for school, leaving them balled up on my desk. It didn't get any better later. Outside my house, there were hundreds of them, tied between houses, around cars, across streets. This had to be some super elaborate prank, one of those hidden camera shows or a comedy improv blog. They had gotten everyone else to play along too. Passersby were tangled in them, tying them to objects they were walking towards and away from, as if they had been and were continuing to follow the course laid out for them. I nervously continued my journey to school. On the bus, everyone except me was tied to the door. At school, groups of friends were tied to each other. Teachers were tied to their desk and boards. Oddly enough, at this point, all I could wonder is why I had been left out. When my friend Lucy sat beside me in first period, she simply plunked her bag down on my lap and rested her chin on her hands, looking right past me to the window outside. Hey, Lucy. No response. Come on. I didn't expect you to be in on this too. She sighed and started taking books from her bag. All the books were tied to her hands. I grinned and yanked one of the strings off a book. She didn't seem to notice, instead simply disregarded the book completely, letting it drop to the floor without a moment's hesitation. I leaned down, picking her book up and placing it back on her desk. She took no notice. Well, if that's how we're going to play it, I smiled, trying to look playful, but really just trying to hide my nervousness. I bundled all the strings attached to her together with one hand and pulled them all free. She blinked, turning to stare at me. Holy crap, Martin. You're like a ninja or something. I've been sitting here for maybe 10 minutes. I smiled again, relieved my friend had finally noticed me. Where did all these strings come from? She gasped, seemingly noticing for the first time. I assumed you were all fucking with me. She stood up, backed into a corner. No one else in class noticed. They weren't here just a minute ago. Do you see them too? Her tone made it clear she was genuinely scared. No, didn't you? I was interrupted by my teacher slamming the door behind her. Everyone except me and Lucy murmured a good morning, and still no one seemed to pay either of us any notice. People have been ignoring me all day, I said to Lucy before turning to our teacher. Hey, dumb bitch. Can't teach for shit. No reaction. I'm getting away from all this shit. Lucy pulled a few strings aside and left the class. I followed, and surprise, surprise, no one else noticed. We wandered the corridors, leaving and entering classes as we saw fit. Whenever we untied a chair or a book from someone else, it was like it suddenly didn't matter to them. It didn't exist. I showed her the street outside. There were more strings than when I came in this morning, twice as many. We carefully picked our way through the tangle, making our way to a nearby coffee shop. Not particularly grand, I know, but what would you do in our situation? As I said, fear of the unknown sometimes seems like the safer option. On a few occasions, I suggested we untie a few more people. Lucy was opposed to it, remembering how terrified she had been. In the coffee shop, we grabbed a couple of sandwiches and drinks from the fridge. We found a table, untied all the strings attached to the chairs, and sat down. We both ate in silence, both of us too scared, both of us distracting ourselves by watching the strangers in the shop, oblivious to the strings. After 20 minutes, Lucy spoke up. Now she's going to take that sandwich, she said, pointing at a woman across the shop. Sure enough, she walked to the fridge and took the plastic wrapped sandwich she was tied to. She pays for it and then leaves. She did so according to the prophecies of the strings. That guy doesn't intend to pay. I watched as a man took his coffee and ran out of the store. The two servers just looked too exasperated to go after him. This is horrible, she whimpered. Let's go, please. Outside wasn't much better. Everyone just followed the strings instructions, going about their daily lives. Lucy announced that she was going home to sleep this off, and I agreed to walk her home. She only lived 10 minutes away. Away from the busier part of town, there were fewer strings. It was nicer, and we could pretend it wasn't happening. When we turned onto Lucy Street, she stopped, her mouth fallen open. What now? I broke the silence, my voice sounding surprisingly small. Look, she pointed outside one of her neighbor's houses. I saw it clearly, and I'll take my memory of that moment till the day I die. A little dark imp, maybe 3 foot tall, walking along with its knuckles on the ground, almost like a monkey. It had 2 bulbous yellow eyes, taking up about half of its face, and no mouth or any other facial features. It was holding a hammer and a ball of twine, which it was letting out behind it. It walked quickly and quietly from the front door of the house to the mailbox. It stopped hammering a nail into the side of the mailbox and tied its string around it. It turned to face us and stopped when it spotted us. My bottom fell out even further than it had already been, but it just stared with a look of surprise and curiosity. You could almost say it was more frightened. It was the more frightened one. Suddenly, it beckoned to us with its tiny hand. I looked at Lucy. She hadn't moved. I looked back at the imp, which stared at me. I halved the distance between us and then halved it again. This wasn't fear of the unknown anymore. It was fear of this little guy. I didn't seem like anything to be scared of. When I was a meter away from it, it extended its hand. Hi. I shook it. It nodded in approval, blinking its massive yellow eyes up at me. So you're the ones in charge of the strings? It nodded eagerly. I called Lucy over, but she stayed where she was. Are there more of you? Another nod. I wanted to ask it so many questions about what it was and where it came from, but it seemed for now I was stuck with only yes or no questions. Do we even have free will? It just looked at me. almost sadly. I immediately felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't bear looking at the little monster anymore. I grabbed Lucy, who had been listening to our exchange and now sat on the curb with her head in her hands. Come on. We entered her house. I made her a cup of tea. When I found her in the living room, she had untied her dog, who was curled up with it, crying. She sat the tea down and sat. I set the tea down and sat beside her. I'm so scared, she whispered after a good 10 minutes of sobbing. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I'm going to sleep, she mumbled suddenly, and was under within 10 minutes. Sleep was starting to sound pretty good all of a sudden. My eyelids suddenly felt like they were being weighed down. I collapsed to the rug, and the last thing I heard before I fell asleep was the scurrying of several sets of little feet nearby. I felt much better the next day, as if the whole affair had been a dream. I'd probably have believed that I'd probably have believed that if I hadn't been awoken by Lucy's mother that morning, wondering what I was doing sleeping over without permission or something. Over breakfast, Lucy asked me why I looked so pale and nervous. I turned to her and smiled, mumbling something to her about feeling sick. But the truth was, I was scared because I couldn't see any strings, and I was wondering whether my actions were truly my own. This original author is Tesla. Rainer. What up, Rainer? I know, right, Devil Jack? You only asked it a couple of questions, huh? Oh, you're working on stuff for me? Nice. Stuff for me to narrate for videos, or stuff for me to read on Murder Mondays? What was the story idea, Haley? And there goes my... I gotta wait for my chat to come back. What is taking so long for this chat to come back? There we go. I sold my soul. Let's see here. Huh, that's not in here. It's not on my list here, Haley. Could you DM me a link to the story, please, Haley? What's my favorite TV show? I don't watch television, Johnny. I never watch television. My favorite TV show of all time is probably The X-Files. Thank you, Haley. I like The X-Files a lot, but I don't watch television, you know? All right, in the meantime, I'm going to read another story. It's called The Guardian Angel. And I am always with you. I was there from the time you were born. I stood in the delivery room, staring down at you before you could even open your eyes to see me. Your parents, relatives, and doctors couldn't see me there in the corner. I watched you with cloudy eyes, but I was there from the time you were born, and I followed you home. I was with you always, your constant companion, You played with your toys alone while I stared from all angles in nearby mirrors, my matted, clotted hair with oily sweat that hung off my dented forehead like glue. I was always your constant companion, drifting behind your mother's car on your ride to preschool. You alone in the bathroom, but I was on the other side of the door, wind whistling through the bruised hole in my throat, my arms twisted and hanging in their sockets as I stood hunched on the other side of the shower curtain. I waited and followed you. I followed and drifted behind you. I'm not seen. I'm almost not there in light. You never saw me that morning as I sat across from you at the breakfast table, a shiny red clot hanging from an empty tooth socket as I gaped grotesquely at you. I wonder sometimes if you know I'm there. I think you're aware, but you'll never understand just how close I am. I spend hours of your day doing nothing more than breathing in your ear. Breathing, gagging, really. I crave to be close to you, to always wrap my crippled arms around your neck, to lie near you every single night, cloudy eyes staring at your ceiling underneath your bed, at your sleeping face in the dark. Yes, you caught me staring occasionally. Your parents came running down to your room one night when you screamed. You were just beginning to talk, so you were able to cry out, "Man! Man in my room!" You thought you'd never forget the sight of me, with my collapsed jaw hanging to my chest, swinging back and forth. I sank back into your closet, and your mother was unable to see me, though you pointed and pointed and pointed. You thought you'd never forget when they left that same night. You saw the closet door crack so softly and me crawling across the floor to your bed on all fours, shambling and jerking movements as I pushed myself under your bed and disjointed limbs. You learned a new word for me, boogeyman. Not quite the monster you thought I was. I'm just waiting and following you always, touching your face with my knotted fingers as you sleep. You'll see me again soon. Any day now I'm coming blunt and brutal. One day you'll walk across the road and I believe I'll plow into you with a loud roar and a screech. You rolling on the pavement, rolling under wheels, blunt force, metal fenders, and my fingers touching your face again and again as you stare up from the cold pavement with cloudy eyes, your matted, clotted hair hanging in your face and your jaw unhinged, swinging to your chest. You'll see me approaching. No one else will see me. You will stare past them into my eyes, and I'll leer down at you. For the first time in your life, something like a smile will come over my face. You'll swear you're looking into a mirror as clotted red bubbles from your mouth. I'll lean down, past the doctors and the ogling people, and pick you up in my crooked arms. Our faces will touch, my wings will unfurl, and then you'll have to follow me. And I am always with you. I am your guardian angel. That was an interesting one. Kind of implied that his own future dead self was his guardian angel. The Crow Files. Actually, I watched when they rebooted it the first time, the X Files. But I didn't watch it when it came back again. So I haven't seen like the latest one of that.
Listen. Stay a while and listen.
I don't think it was the guardian angel that ran him over with the car. even though it did sound like that. I don't know. That was weird. Alrighty, I'm going to find another story to read. What's this one? This one's tiny. It's called Baby Doll. In rural southern Illinois, a toy company began selling realistic baby dolls to expectant mothers. But apparently, after the mother had her child, the toy baby would start crying. Eventually, the rocking motion advertised to calm it down wouldn't work. You couldn't get it to stop without shaking it. Eventually, when it started crying, the parent would have to beat it, and the beatings and thrashings would have get harder and harder to get it to be quiet. The only thing that seemed to shut the baby doll up permanently was to bash its head against the wall to destroy whichever mechanism triggered the crying. On more than one occasion, though, neighbors called the authorities to report child abuse. And when the police arrived, they found the bloody remains of infants smeared across the wall and the floor. In most cases, the mother couldn't understand why the police were there. She just got rid of the stupid doll as she rocked a baby-shaped bundle in her arms. Interesting. Oh, it's okay, Haley. I'll look it up. You are not a dumbass, Haley. I sold my soul for a dishwasher. Alrighty. It is written by Pete the Seed. I sold my soul for a used dishwasher. I would like it back. As the title says, I sold my soul for a used dishwasher. It seemed like a solid trade at the time. It was online. The guy was selling it on a local first sales site. The guy wanted like 200 pounds for it. I don't have that kind of money. I asked if he'd be willing to go any lower. In a joking manner, he suggested he'd sell it for my soul, and even including free shipping and installation. Sweet. Sign me right up. He emailed some documents, which I didn't even read. I signed, and the next day, 2 men showed up and installed it. I was pretty smug and assumed the guy just needed to get rid of it and had a sense of humor. However, it's since come to light that I may have actually given away my soul. Oh, and souls are real. Who knew? Not me. Being soulless seems to come with a few side effects that have slowly but surely begun to impact my daily life. I don't dream anymore. Instead, each and every night I found myself entering a pool of nothingness that I can't quite describe. I don't really have much passion for anything. Not that I was the most passionate guy around before. I'm what you'd call a go with the flow type of guy anyway. I don't laugh or cry. I'm never happy or sad, angry or excited. Everything is inconsequential. Nothing has meaning. I just am. Oh, and I can see the dead, which kind of sucks. I first realized that I could see the dead when I walked into my apartment and saw a dead guy. He was just standing there staring at me. It was pretty horrifying, honestly. I don't know how I knew he was dead. It was just an instinctive feeling I got. He's sometimes slightly transparent, which is a bit of a giveaway. Hold on, I need to take a drink of water. Sorry about that. He doesn't really talk to me either. He just walks around the apartment looking pretty pissed. I guess I would be too. I learned from a neighbor that he died from a heart attack caused by Viagra, that the girl had freaked and bailed on him without calling the cops. It took a few weeks for him to be found too. When the apartment began to secrete a rather unique stench. He's still stiff down there. Naked too. It's uncomfortable, sure, but I don't exactly have the means to move somewhere else. Truthfully, he's kind of a chill dude as far as the dead goes. He just looks frustrated all the time, but mostly keeps to himself. Spends a lot of time in the bathroom, staring at himself in a mirror. He leaves when I need to shit, though, so at least he's considerate. I call him Gary. Besides my ethereal roommate, the dead mostly wander around doing nothing. They can't really interact with anything, which I guess is pretty dull. There's not as many of them as you might think, because I suppose most of them move on to the next place. They're not all like Gary either. The vast majority that I've seen have disturbed me beyond measure. Burnt, walking corpses, forever crying out and yelling and screaming in agony. Fathers and mothers following their families, crying out to be noticed, begging to be able to tell their loved ones that they're still with them, but having absolutely no way to do so. The children are the worst. They don't have the means to understand what has happened to them and spend their days wandering the busy streets, reaching out for a helping hand that can't even perceive them. It would be tough to watch were I not, well, soulless. Anyway, I decided that it's time to get my soul back. It's more of a principle thing than anything else. I don't like the thought of someone playing with it, touching it. It grosses me out. Plus, there's the whole eternal damnation thing, which is pretty daunting. The dishwasher has also started leaking, and I didn't exactly get a warranty. I hadn't managed to make much headway getting it back. There's not much solid information out there about reclaiming souls, believe it or not. I tried contacting the guy who bought it to see if he accepts refunds. He hasn't replied to my messages, which is a bit of a dick move. Mostly, I've just spent time browsing the internet and looking for a loophole. No such luck so far, but I'm optimistic. Anyway, last night I came upon some article on the absolutely deepest recesses of the internet, somewhere no living man has ever been. It was page 5 on Google. It was a ritual to summon a demon. A decent starting point, I figured. It's not exactly like I can be dismissive of the supernatural any longer. I won't go into details, but let's just say that it involves some candles, burning some incense, and offering up a series of foreign spices. I raided my neighbor's spice rack. Nothing really happened at first. I prepared the summoning as instructed, chanted the words as best I could. Gary joined me. Sitting on the sofa and watching. I wish he'd at least put down a towel before he sat on things, but each time I suggested he'd just walk away through a wall or something. There's no sense of arguing with some people. I eventually gave up, sat down next to Gary, and turned on the TV. We watched some Netflix. I had a beer. Gary stared at his ghostly boner for a while. Not a bad evening. I had almost forgotten about the entire summoning thing when my apartment burst into a supernova of despair. Green flames roared and licked the ceiling, emerging from an abyss that opened on my floor. My heart grew still and my blood ran cold. Not because my landlord made it very clear that any damage to the walls and ceiling was coming straight out of my deposit, but more so because I was immediately filled with the daunting sensation that I had made a huge error in judgment. I may be empty, but one thing I could still feel was fear, apparently. I suppose it's instinctual, a, a, res, a residual, a residual, a residual survival instinct left over from when I had been truly alive. A voice emerged from the fire so deep that I could feel the vibrations weaving through my bones. It was familiar, but utterly alien at the same time. A voice I'd heard 1,000 times, but also never at all. My brain immediately informed me that I should be running away from whatever unnatural hellscape that I had just welcomed into my home. My knees seized, making that impossible. Filth. Shit and filth running over mountains of flesh, bone and bile. People piled together in pits with hands and arms outstretched, reaching towards the sky. A mass of men and women, children all screaming and begging, crying out, clawing at each other, and trying to pull themselves from the pit of their own waste like maggots festering in a wound. My words caught in my throat, the inside of my mouth drying in an instant. All right. Oh, okay, noted. Now, if we could just go back to the issue at hand. There is pain, unimaginable oceans of pain that drag you down into a depth of horror, like the likes of which the living cannot even begin to comprehend. Voices screaming eternally for mercy from a God who cannot hear them. Parents trample their children for but an instant of relief from the ceaseless torment. Storms of acid rain down upon the... Yeah, I got that. Now, I really do have some questions if you have a moment. I get the feeling I won't be able to do this twice. Ask then, mortal. But know that words cannot convey the true reality that awaits all that walk the earth. There is no escape. There is no heaven. There is no justice. There is only pain. Yeah, I got that. Well, I guess I just wanted to know how to get my soul back. I kind of feel like I was misled on the whole deal, really, but I'm starting to think there's no union I can really take. Damn demon voice. There's no union I can really take my concerns to. Yeah, that's what I thought too when I was reading that. There is no Johnny, only Zool. Hey, American Maniac. All right. The fire grew dim for a few moments, as though it was pondering over my words. My apartment grew silent. Gary looked at me bewildered. He apparently deemed what was occurring more important than his eternal erection. You summoned me here, mortal, for such a petty concern as a soul? I, who have forged empires and tempered states, whose name is forbidden in 1,000 worlds for fear that I shall return to reap what is owed. You dare bring me such trifles? The crackling of the flames seemed to turn into more of a taunt from the damned. I could see faces within them, writhing out with mouths outstretched, howling into eternity. Some looked at me with pleading eyes, as though I was a savior to free them from this misery. Others had no eyes at all. Only he whom has claim over your soul may return it, and only from his own free will. Souls cannot be stolen or claimed. They can only be given freely. I know, right? Okay, that was something I could work with. I stood up and took a few steps back from the flames, cautiously. I hadn't thought about how I was supposed to end this summoning because I honestly hadn't expected anything to come of it. Hindsight can really bite you, I guess. The laughter grew louder until it filled what felt like the world. Winds howled outwards, carrying wails with them, and each told the tale of a different torment. A few beads of sweat began forming on my brow, my stomach turning into knots. 4 warnings, did you pass out? Who holds your soul? I cannot say, mortal. But you have more pressing matters at hand. You may be soulless, but you will still feel every single one of the sweet pleasures that damnation has to offer. You will come with me now and taste the sweet nectar of true suffering. From the black abyss that had covered the ground, an outstretched hand emerged, the palm larger than my head. Its skin was ashen gray, cracked with veins of pure fire. Actually, after this story, no, I better not. The nails were sharper than a knife and scratched deep grooves into my wooden floor as the beast pulled itself upwards. You are mine now. You will come with me, willing or not. There is no escape. You will witness firsthand my dominion. I will tear you limb from limb and then reform you whole to experience it all again. Your memories of life will fade, and only suffering will... Gary stood from the sofa, walked towards the abyss in all his naked glory. He raised an outstretched hand from which a pillar of light shot forth that almost blinded me. I can still see spots. The beast roared and screamed as its arms shedded into dust, and falling into the darkness, the flames withdrew with it, and with a sudden gust, the whole vanished to nothing. Gary looked at me, shrugged, walked into the bathroom to stare at himself in the mirror. I didn't ask. So that was yesterday. I've spent the night processing the entire ordeal and figured it's time to start looking. So if anyone knows a guy that trades used appliances for souls, let me know. I'm open to suggestions as well. If anything develops, I'll be sure to let you guys know. And apparently there's a part 2 to this. So let me get another drink. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and do all that other fancy stuff. I sold my soul for a dishwasher and would like it back. Part 2. Written by Pete the Seed. For those who aren't in the know, not long ago I sold my soul for a 200-pound used dishwasher. This has proven to be a rather irresponsible decision, and now I'm a soulless husk who sees the dead. Oh, and the dishwasher has started leaking a weird brown gunk all over my kitchen floor, which kind of sucks. I recently made the decision to reclaim my soul, which has turned out to be kind of tricky. So far, my endeavors had led me to summoning a demon into my apartment who attempted to drag me back to hell and violate me. Don't worry, my naked ghost roommate Gary vanquished him, I think. He has a permanent ghost boner. It's super weird. Anyway, it turned out that the only way to reclaim my soul is to be given it back by the guy who I traded it with. Simple stuff, surely. Not quite. I'd been unable to contact him online because the douche is ignoring all of my messages. That pretty much exhausted all of my options, so I decided it better to just embrace the soulless lifestyle. Sure, it has its flaws. I now couldn't even leave my apartment without witnessing a parade of deceased souls, and the floorboards inside my apartment, where there had briefly been a portal to hell, now leaked the tears and howls of the damned. But I guess nothing's perfect. I could grow accustomed to the dead, and I'd already covered my floor with a nice new rug that muffled most of the cries of the condemned. Things were looking up. That is, until I made a solid breakthrough in the search for my soul through my exceptional perception, cunning, and intuition. The newspaper ad read, "Need new stove? Perhaps fridge, freezer? Call now. Will accept best offer. Now accepting souls." It seems a bit too on the nose to be a coincidence. I made the call, got an address, and embarked on my journey of soul reclamation. Gary joined me, and I sensed this was just another average Tuesday for him. Our journey took us to the downtown marketplace. It was early morning, and the place was filled with people setting up stalls of strange meats and fish, novelty decorations, and knockoff clothes. The dead were everywhere. Gary approached one, a weeping woman who stood in the middle of the walkway. She was dripping wet from head to toe, her skin a strange tint of blue, and her arms slashed from wrist to elbow. He stood in front of her, presenting himself. She stopped weeping, looked Gary up and down, and then proceeded to continue weeping whilst walking away. Gary looked like he let out an inaudible sigh. I guess even in death, rejection is hard. Undeterred, he walked over to another. I decided to leave it to him. You do you, Gary. The actual living souls were busy unloading vans and pitching signs, and I wondered where it was that I would begin my search. The call hadn't been very specific on the exact location of this trader of souls, so I guessed I'd have to do a bit of legwork. Maybe give a few people the rundown. Maybe play a little good cop, bad cop with my spectral sidekick. One thing was certain. It would be a grueling day. Oh, you want Dave? He's right here. The fish salesman pointed towards a warehouse at the other side of the market, handing me back the newspaper clipping I'd given him. All right, then. The warehouse in question looked deserted, and the only entrance I could find lay down a dingy alleyway locked with thick rusted chains. The whole place screamed murder. As I approached the alleyway, a hand grasped my wrist and pulled me back. You don't want to go in there. An old, veiled woman informed me in a thick Eastern accent. Oh, I don't really know how to do an Eastern accent. No good in there, child. Only darkness. Her skin had the feel of dry plastic and was as smooth as sandpaper. Right, I'm actually looking for a guy who has my soul. I hear his name is Dave. She let go of my arm and began taking steps backwards, looking me up and down as she did so. You are unnatural, tainted, no, evil, unclean, you leave, be gone. She began gesturing me away with one hand, another reaching for a talisman around her neck and gripping it tightly. She began hissing, and I got the impression that I wasn't wanted. I continued down the alleyway. Getting inside proved rather difficult. The door was locked, and as rusted as they were, the chains wouldn't budge. There was a small window overhead, which after a great deal of exertion and strain, I managed to climb and squeeze through, landing hard on the other side. Gary rejoined me and just walked right through it. Ahead of me lay a barely lit, stretching hallway, graffiti-stained walls covering in obscenities and foul depictions of genitals. Smeared next to the doorway in what I assume was red paint were the words, "Abandon all hope, dickweeds." A cold wind ran the length of the hall. The darkness felt heavy. I looked at Gary, who was busy comparing a detailed depiction of a male member with his own phantom limb, looking defeated. He walked ahead. A lifetime must have passed as we walked the hall. It felt like hours rolled over into days, but at the same time, it felt like no time had passed at all. The way in which we'd entered had long since disappeared into nothingness, and we reached no end. The hallway was ceaseless. My eyes adjusted to the darkness as best I could, but I stumbled occasionally and fell flat on my face more than once. Gary attempted to catch me at one point, but I fell right through him. I appreciated the thought, though. After a long while, or maybe just a few minutes, I suggested we should probably turn back, and that no good would come from walking down that hallway forever. Gary looked as though he was cool either way, so I took the initiative and began to turn back. There is no escape, a voice whispered from the darkness, everywhere and nowhere. It was soft, almost childlike. You cannot escape eternity. Another voice joined in, it too a whisper, but distinctly deeper, and croaked, You will wander this place until the stars bleed out and all light fades from the heavens. A third voice, this one louder and almost taunting, a slight laugh in its tone. Your feet will grind to blood and dust, and even then you will crawl on mangled stubs and still come no closer to salvation. More voices pitched in as though every speck of darkness was reaching out and singing similar horrors into my mind. A chorus of the macabre and morbid. I'm actually just looking for Dave. Do you guys know where he is? Or do you guys know if he's here? Or... The voices burst into manic giggling and laughter inside my mind, louder than anything I thought possible. My head throbbed with the weight of it all. A few trickles of blood began to drip from my nose. I could taste iron on the back of my throat. In synchronicity, they spoke, and each word was an explosion inside my skull. Lost little lamb, cry so we can taste the tears. Scream so that we may find bliss in the melody. Suffer so that we may make you pure. Embrace us. From all around my being, hands outstretched, they gripped clothing and skin and hair, dug into bone and hooked into tendons, pulling and pushing and yanking and spilling and tearing and laughing and screaming and ripping and... The lights turned on overhead. I found myself writhing on the floor alone. There were no hands, no voices in my head. We were in a large warehouse floor, surrounded by boxes and crates and trucks. Gary stood beside me, still naked as ever. In the center of the floor sat a young guy on a fold-out garden chair. He looked no older than 18 and wore dirty overalls and a black beanie. He waved. Hey. I pulled myself to my feet, dusted myself off. That was weird. Yeah, sorry about that. Security system. Cool, right? Had a few too many break-ins lately, he announced, sipping at a thermos. He gestured for me to approach. Are you Dave? I asked, rubbing at my back, which ached fiercely. Yep, that's me. Are you here for the stove? I got a couple left, good condition, too. Almost new. The next few minutes were spent with me explaining that I wasn't in fact there to purchase a stove, that I was trying to get my soul back. Excuse me. I explained that I traded my soul online. He apologized for not responding to my emails, got me a coffee. It tasted like manual labor. He was an all right guy, really. He was even willing to trade back my soul for the dishwasher so long as I paid him a small accounting fee. We settled on 50 pounds, which I wasn't too pleased, but I figured it was probably the best deal I was going to get. We shook hands, and he went and fetched the water-damaged box filled with junk and began rustling through it. I know I had it here somewhere. No, not that. Nope, no, that's Jimmy's. Where did I... Oh, shit, that's right. He closed the box and scratched at his jaw. What's wrong? I asked as he started to pace back and forth. Yeah, bit of an issue, buddy. I traded a whole bunch of souls yesterday. I think yours was one of them. Feeling slightly displeased at this revelation, I inquired to whom he had given my soul. It's right. I'm not 100% on this, but I'm pretty certain that your soul is now in hell. Like 98% sure. He went on to explain that he had a regular trade deal with some demon. Dave gave him souls, and the demon gifted Dave with rare antiquities and ungodly security systems. It was apparently a no-go-back kind of trade, and that getting it was pretty much a lost cause. I was beginning to think that I had wasted the entire Tuesday. Dave, however, advised me that not all was lost. He could simply open a gateway, and we could go and get the soul. This, of course, came with an opening a doorway to hell fee, but Dave assured me that he did in fact accept credit cards. After the payment cleared, Dave went about drawing all sorts of chalk symbols on the wall to the warehouse floor, each appearing to be from a different language that I imagine nobody has spoken for a very long time. When that was finished, he smeared an odd scarlet liquid across the symbols that he got from a jar, and coupled with a brief reading of scripture, Gary wandered around, and I did a Sudoku. Right, that's that. Now we wait, Dave announced, his hands on his hips. He looked quite pleased with himself, then frowned for a moment and licked his thumb, rubbed a little bit of chalk from the wall, and then returned to looking pleased. It should be open any minute now. We waited for 7 hours. Dave filled me in on the whole soul trade business, about how he'd gotten this from his grandma, and was trying to bring the industry into the 21st century. He'd only been doing it for a couple of months, but things were on the up and up. He was even thinking about setting up his own website. So, does your friend wear clothes, or is that a stylistic choice? Oh yeah, that's Gary, I muttered, taken aback. You can see him? Clear as day. Sup? He nodded. Gary nodded back. I got the sight, as my grandma used to say. Spooky stuff. Right. Well, I'm not sure a low groan emerged from the wall, like the bricks themselves were in pain. I put down the coffee I had been nursing. Dave jumped to his feet, elated. Yes, finally! Small fissures began to appear in the brick, crackling like outstretched veins. From them, a thin fog began to seep outwards. The light overhead flickered and instantaneously erupted into a shower of sparks and glass. "You've done this before, right?" I asked. The fog sank from the cracks and began flowing across the ground. Chips of brick began to crumble, and the groan grew louder still. "Oh, yeah, tons of times." Dave had to shout at this point just to be heard over the ceaseless din of the opening gateway. "Well, maybe not success." The world as I knew it exploded. It's okay, Aries. Thanks for coming, though. I appreciate you coming. The wall erupted outward, sending chunks of bricks and concrete flying. Dave flew with it. Dust and rubble and blood sprang from where he had been standing. Where there had once been a wall, a gaping hole into nothingness, now stood a swirling vortex of foreboding darkness. The air all around began to move towards it like water down a plug hole. And the ground beneath my feet was gone before I knew what was happening, and I found myself falling through the air towards the vortex's gaping maw. I was pulled ever inward, swirling and screaming and howling into the madness of it all. And then I wasn't. I was on the floor in the warehouse where I'd been only moments ago. For the second time, I stood and brushed myself off and coughed up what 9 out of 10 doctors would call a concerning amount of blood. Disoriented, I reached for my coffee and took a sip, which I immediately spat across the ground as it tasted like shit, like actual feces. I threw the cup on the ground and I looked around. Yeah, I was still in the warehouse, but everything seemed slightly off. The walls that had once been slightly dirty were now layered in a thick coat of rust, and the air was heavy and dense, and the ground was coated in fog that had seeped through the walls earlier. The gateway was gone, and the wall that stood where it had been was coated in all manner of filth. I could see my breath escape my lips, and my whole body shivered in the cold. Shadows darted around the peripheral of my vision, and the groan that I had heard earlier was now a steady hum in the distance. Ever so faintly in the distance, I could hear screaming. Boogie is the dishwasher, leaking a strange, nasty liquid. Gary stood beside me still. I swallowed hard. The only comfort I could find in the moment was that Gary looked as disinterested as ever. He began to walk forward, and I followed. I descended into hell, guided by my own fully erect Virgil. Well, that's all they got on that one so far. And it was a year ago, so I don't know if he's ever gonna... Like, seriously, you didn't extend this? You never finished this? Oh. Oh, no. No. Wow, what a ripoff. Hold on, let me look at this guy's Reddit and see if there's actually... Aha, part 3. Yes. All right, Pete the Seed. I sold my soul for a used dishwasher and would like it back. Part 3. After I get something to drink. Everybody please like and share and sub if you're not, and all that fancy stuff. It's just water. I just drinking water. It's been difficult to write this third and final part of my tale. Honestly, no matter how I try to write it, nothing truly conveys what I've come to experience. I'll do my best. We left off with Gary and I finding ourselves in hell, which in itself is a rather precarious predicament. The search for my soul had been a rather tenuous one. Tenuous? Huh. And as we left, ventured out. And as we ventured out from that warehouse and into the unknown, I felt a strange sense that everything was going to be okay. I lost Gary on the first day. We traversed across a landscape of hell, which is far less pedestrian friendly than you might think. Mountains scoured the horizon, broken apart by deep ravines that disappeared in the darkness. The sky was ablaze, and the lightning that rained down from its inferno left fissures large enough to swallow you whole. The winds strong enough to strip flesh from bone came and went, and carried with them the howls of those too unfortunate to get caught in its mist. If I'd came here on vacation, I'd give it 2 out of 5 stars. Tenuous. Thank you. We crawled and stumbled across the cliff, face overlooking a vast expanse of land that outstretched farther than the eye could see. Wilted forests and bodies of gray water littered the expanse, with figures and shapes darting around wildly, predators and prey. Whilst we crawled across the jagged and crumbling rocks, lightning struck between us, which sent Gary tumbling down into the chaos. He cupped his genitals the entire fall as he rolled and collided with stone. So, that was kinda lame. I managed to reach the end of the cliff face, only to find myself staring outwards at another stretch of horrors and obscenities. I was getting the impression that there wasn't a great deal of aesthetic variance in hell. I silently wished Gary the best of luck and continued onwards. I didn't really have a plan in mind. Hell, as far as I knew, could be infinite in size, and the likelihood of just stumbling upon my soul could be less likely than 2 grains of rice adrift at sea bumping into each other. The only thing that was fueling my soulless being was a pure sense of annoyance at the entire ordeal. I had faced a great deal of inconvenience thus far and didn't want to admit that I wasted the better part of a week. I eventually found myself a quaint little cavern overlooking what I'm pretty sure was an ocean of feces. I decided to use as a temporary retreat from the dreary horrors of hell. I folded my jacket into a pillow, sat down to enjoy some quality me time, where I could recoup and gather myself. I'd get some rest until morning, maybe lead a one-man search party for Gary and plan my next course of action. I was relatively certain that by the end of the next day, I'd be well on my way home and able to put the entire thing behind me. I was in hell for over 6 months. Less than an hour after settling down in my hellscape abode, I found myself being woken with spear inches from my face. Well, I remember thinking, this is interesting. The man who held the spear was nothing but skin pulled tightly over thin bones, his eyes sunken deep into the skull, and his lips were receded, revealing his broken and blackened teeth. Coating his skin was a mixture of bodily mutilations and tribal paint that I sensed were largely a fashion choice. Behind him stood others, similarly, I always have trouble with that one, similarly styled and equally deranged. Never having been a fight my way out kind of lad, I pretty much surrendered on the spot. Before I could protest the necessity of it all, I found myself bound by my wrists and dragged from my dwelling, poked and prodded with sticks and stones along the way. Outside of the cave stood what I can only describe as a roaming hellish gypsy brigade. Strange horse-like creatures pulled along obscene carts built from bone and skin. Behind each lay a trail of poor souls, bound the same as I, connected in a train and pulled behind each of the carts. My captures had innumerable friends, all of which marched and chanted and yelled crazily, taunting their prisoners as they went. I was attached to the back of one trail, and the gypsy brigade moved onwards with me in tow. I don't know how long we marched for. Hell had no day or night cycle, no change in seasons, and certainly no calendars. I marked the passing of time the best I could. The only real judge I had was the growth of my hair and beard. I'd long since accepted that it would take me at least 3 months to grow out what could be potentially described as a semi-successful beard, and whilst I was pulled along across hell, I went from clean-shaven to Santa Claus. We would march day in and day out, resting only for a few sparing hours for whatever rest we could get before being dragged along again. We were fed filth-coated bowels of gruel-like substance, and I'm pretty sure the horse creatures excreted. I've never been a picky eater, but it only took a few days before I even dared dip into the putrid mixture. I won't go into too much detail about my time captured in hell. Truthfully, every day I brought a new nightmare, each one grimmer and each one more horrifying than the last. We were led through ceaseless valleys that held grand pits of the damned who writhed in their own misery. We trekked through deep caverns that burrowed into the earth, where spider-like creatures the size of mammoths roamed in numbers unknown. When we reached an ocean, boats were assembled, and we sailed through storms across the ocean of shit and blood and bile, bearing witness to indescribable beasts whose lengths could span cities as they erupted upwards from the water's depths, bringing with them a bellowing cry that could deafen ears. We miserably trudged through swamps of long-dead trees with bubbling pools of acid that exploded outwards and coated more than one of us, whom immediately writhed down into a puddle of their own being. If I had a soul, I'd have probably been pretty depressed. When my ankles could take no more, I crawled. When I could crawl no more, I was pulled until the skin peeled from my back. After a lifetime, we reached our destination. We were pulled into a grand encampment, a city of skin-forged tents and raging bonfires. Spikes adorned with severed heads were littered like streetlights. Discarded bones laying like trash. Tribal savages roamed and sung and chanted and danced in every direction. It wasn't really my kind of scene. Various other caravans were unloading their own hordes of captives, all lined up and chained like dogs. Forced to my knees, I was made to join them. All right, Drac. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for hanging out, man. We were left there to rot. Occasionally, a savage would approach and inspect one of us, arms lifted and groped, legs tapped and stretched, mouths pulled open and examined. Sometimes, sorry, I gotta take another drink. Welcome back. Sometimes they were then ignored. Other times they were untied and taken away not to return. I imagine they went to a happier, cheerier place, maybe Morocco. We slept on the floor. We pissed and shit on the floor. Scraps were flung at us, often just out of reach. Dignity was in sparse supply in those moments. As time passed, those who I had been brought in with dwindled one by one. Some perished, others were taken. One chewed through his chain, reducing his teeth to broken, shattered stubs. He tried to run, and was ridden down and set alight. Others came and were chained, but I remained. If they were selling us, my captors would need to offer a pretty substantial discount if they wanted to be rid of my sorry, soulless ass, it seemed. I retreated inwards, spending my days staring into space as caravan after caravan rolled into the camp, selling their wares and trading in suffering. Psst! Hey! Dude! I snapped out of a daze at the words. It was the first language I'd heard since arriving, and that I understood. I turned my head as best I could to look behind me. I saw another poor captured man trying to get my attention. He wore tattered, torn overalls and remained of a black beanie. Oh, hey, Dave. Hey, it's you. Remember me? I opened the portal that got us here? Fun times, right? Crazy times. So, how you been? Dave had seen better days. Ragged, ginger curls hung down from his beanie, matted like a dog. His face was battered and bruised, and he looked as though he hadn't eaten in a week. Oh, and he had only one eye now. Or did he only have one eye already? I couldn't remember. Oh, I'm not bad myself. Did some sightseeing, worked on my calves, got a bit of a tan. Oh, and I'm pretty sure I'm a slave now, which is something. You got your soul back, though, right? Man, look at this place. Crazy stuff, am I right? I realized that I didn't like Dave very much. Nope, still soulless. I guess that's kind of been a blessing, really. Puts things into perspective. Really? The demon I sold it to is, like, right over there. He pointed off towards a caravan where a being that was more blob than man sat surrounded by various jars of peculiar glowing liquids. He had small, ill-fitted glasses and 4 arms, each of which was scratching a different orifice that coated his form. The caravan was coated in ornate, ancient jars that each radiated a small flicker of light. Each one had a name. Each one seemed to be vibrating furiously, causing a rattle to the cart. Yeah, that's the guy. I found him not long after we wound up here. Figured he'd help a dude out considering our pre-existing business relationship. Dude sold me for some sheets. Huh? Well, that's neat. Kind of annoying. What with the whole slave thing that I've currently got going for me. I awkwardly maneuvered myself into a sitting position and stared at the caravan. It's difficult to explain, but now that it had been pointed out to me, I could sort of feel a presence coming from the jars. One jar in particular. It sat at the bottom of the cart, slightly damaged, and appeared to be leaking, surrounded by a few other equally damaged wares. My soul was on discount. Remainder bin. That's when Gary showed up again. Where the fuck have you been? Was pretty much all I said. I sat there, bound and chained and displayed like a piece of damaged fruit, staring at my spectral companion that I hadn't seen in what felt like the better part of a year. My hair was wild, my beard and skin coated in all sorts of filth, my jeans had, at best, a week left of decent use in them, my wrists were cut to the bone from my restraints, but I wasn't the only one who had a change of appearance. Gary wore a hat now. More of a crown, actually. It looked to be made of bones and twigs. His once perpetually disgruntled expression had softened, seeming sunken with a hint of sorrow. His once proud, ghastly erection was now but a humble semi. I dared not think what he had endured these past months, but his appearance said it all. Behind him was a small group of damned, a baker's dozen at most. Each one of them wore strange cloaks that covered their forms, their faces expressionless and gaunt. When Gary stepped in front of me, they fell on their knees and began to chant and bow clumsily. I guess Gary was their leader now, or their god. I don't even know. Upon seeing me, Gary turned towards them, made a few gestures, and removed his crown, placing it on the ground. A few of his flock began to tremble, and a few burst into howling tears. One by one, they all departed. Gary looked at me and shrugged, a single ghost tear running down his ghost cheek. It was all ridiculous, honestly. Hey, I said. Gary nodded. Gary approached and began fiddling with my restraints. In a few moments, he had freed me, and none of my captors seemed to notice. I stood up, dusted myself off, and threw up slightly as blood rushed to my feet. I stretched my back and coughed fiercely. Gary gestured his head towards the soul-covered caravan. I nodded, acknowledging that I'd seen it. Well, let's just take it and get out of here. Come on, Gary. You can't steal a soul, buddy. Dave pipped up from behind. Oh, and could I get a hand over here, too? Hell is overrated. I turned back towards the caravan and then back to Dave, then to Gary. You know what? I'm done. Let's just say we tried. We gave it a solid effort. Fuck this. Fuck hell. Fuckity fuck being a hell slave. Fuck you, Dave. Fuck the dishwasher. Fuck your goddamn boner, Gary. And fuck you and your boner. I collapsed, completely finished. Some may say that I was overreacting, but even a soulless husk has its limits. If only I could just rest. Gary didn't react. He looked down upon me, sighed, and disappeared into nothingness as though it was the most casual gesture in the world. I was alone again. I wasn't counting Dave. Fuck this. Fuck whatever that is. I walked forward now, my blood boiling. I don't even know if it was down to the proximity to my soul, proximity of my soul, but I was starting to feel raw, unfiltered emotions seeping into my skin. Fuck souls. Fuck hell so goddamn much. Dude, a little Dave's voice faded into the background. I reached the soul trader, stood before him defiantly. He looked a bit confused and a bit offended. Give me my soul. He blinked. He itched his slime-stained scalp. Strange mucus dripped from one of his many orifices. He didn't seem to mind. He spoke back in a broken tongue and then turned away. Give me my damn soul. Don't be a douche. I reached forward and grabbed the jar that was calling to me. It was cold to the touch and felt far lighter than it should have. The blob guy looked at me, his eyes going wide. He pointed with all 4 arms and all 20 fingers, yelling. The savages around the encampment had begun to take notice. They muttered and whispered between one another and began to approach and encircle me. I took steps backwards, gripping the jar close to my chest like a child grasps a pillow. Look, things might have gotten a little heated, granted. Now, if you just let me walk away with my soul, we can put all of this behind us. A spear flew in my direction, missing my skull by mere inches. Now, that's completely uncalled for. I ran. I don't know where I planned to run to, but I felt like it was the best option at the time. I passed Dave as I went and shot him a kind of look that said, sorry about leaving you in hell. Oh, and fuck you. I left the encampment at full sprint, the savages quickly in pursuit. Nothing but open valleys stretched around, the sky still burning and raging at my feet aching and my heart pounding. My brow dripped sweat. My fingers trembled. I was not letting go of my soul. Hey, yeah, thanks, Jack. Yeah, he was like, fuck you, Dave. Hey, and thank you if you do buy something, Marys. I'd appreciate that. I fell hard. I slipped down a small ravine, landing flat on my back. The jar flew off in an unknown direction. I felt warm liquid trickle down my leg. I'll say it was blood, but it was probably urine. The hell savages were on me in no time. They circled like sharks, weapons outstretched. One of them carried a flaming torch. Another carried barbed whip. I sensed my plan had failed miserably. I spat out dirt. The jar was a few feet away from me. I began to crawl towards it as the lash of the whip came down on my back. I screamed, spittles of blood dusting the ground. I reached the jar. Another whip. I felt the skin of my back tear open. I raised the jar. Another whip. I felt the barbs crack bone. I brought the jar down to the earth as hard as I could. And as I heard the air break as the whip began to bear down again, the jar shattered. Nothingness. Hey, Mr. Reality. Thanks for coming in, man. I was adrift, somewhere and everywhere. I was nothing and everything and something all at once. I felt no pain or ache. I wasn't tired or hot or stressed or scared, just complete and pure nothingness. Wherever I was, I felt as though I'd been there before. I could sense nothing, but at the same time, everything was heightened and overloading. I had no experience in it, but I imagined it's what meth felt like. Then, as though nothing had happened at all, I was back. I felt different, but the same. I was disoriented. I could see nothing but the ground, and slowly the pain that radiated my body returned. I forced myself onto my back, which burned fiercely. I was still in hell. Great. The savages stood around me now, eyes widened and weapons gripped. A few of them scowled. Others looked frightened. I stood up and waited for the inevitable killing strike. It never came. One by one, they began to turn tail and run, fleeing back to the encampment. Soon enough, I stood alone, surrounded by discarded weapons. Well, that was odd. I guess it was one of those things you just have to roll with. Exhausted, I scanned the horizon, decided upon a nice-looking hill to walk towards, and set off. Upon my first step, the ground beneath me crumbled, and I was swallowed by abyss. I faintly heard Dave's voice as a whisper in the distance. You can't steal a soul, buddy. I couldn't see them behind me as I fell. Thousands of souls all piled up on one another, surrounded my nothingness, all reaching upwards towards me. I landed atop the pit, hard. The writhing mess of flesh accepted me, hands outstretched and pulling me inwards. Within moments, I was dragged deep within. I felt the pressure of it all on my chest, the air being forced out of my lungs. I tried to scream, but fingers wrestled into my lips and began to force their way down my throat. With my one free hand, I reached upwards towards the darkness. As I got what I knew would be my last glimpse of anything, light exploded overhead. Pillars of brilliantly white fury descended, burning away at the accursed souls who pulled me downwards. 1,000 shrieks killed my eardrums, withdrawing. I looked up, blinded, and saw the most beautiful sight that any being has ever bared witness to. Gary descended slowly, the light radiating from his glorious form. He floated above me, his angelic erection stronger and prouder than ever. He reached out his hand and took mine and pulled me from perdition. We rose together, Gary's hand locked around my wrist as I hung beneath him. We rose and rose until we had left the abyss and that I had been called to, until hell was but a faint glimpse below. We ascended through the infernal sky, and I closed my eyes and embraced every moment of my Savior's presence. Gary, are you an angel? I don't know whether I actually asked or whether I merely thought it. Within my mind, a gentle and comforting voice replied. I don't recall what it said. The light grew brighter and brighter until it was everything. I awoke in my apartment, and that was that. It turns out I was in hell for about a day and a half, which is mildly frustrating. I'm pretty sure I have my soul back now, which is cool. I don't feel as empty anymore. I still have the dishwasher, too. I'm not really sure what to do with it. I guess I'll just sell it for scrap or something. I can dream again now. I must have slept for the better part of 3 days after my return. I'm not really sure what to make of my experience. I guess it'll take some time to piece everything together and come to terms with what I experienced, if that's possible. I don't see the dead anymore either. The streets are once again only occupied by the living and the homeless. Yeah, that includes Gary, too. That's okay, though, I suppose. I won't forget what he did, even if I don't quite understand it. I think he's still here. Every now and then I catch a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye. Something that looks a hell of a lot like a disembodied penis. And I find comfort in that. He's my friend. Kind of a shame about Dave, though. All right. That was a pretty extensive story. Haley, are you even still here? It was I sold my soul for a used dishwasher and I would like it back. Part 3. Yeah, no, it was a pretty funny story. Well, thank you, Kitbina. All righty. Yeah, we're already heading for 2 hours here, huh? Cool. All right. Does anyone else have any other stories that they'd like me to read here? I'm going to assume that the hoodies in my store are actually pretty good quality too. Just for the simple fact that the 2 shirts I got are nice. Like, because this one's the premium one. And I'm happy with it. And I like how the cuffs aren't like the elastic cuffs, you know? But the arms are, hey, Mr. Reality, you got beefy arms. Was the arms on yours like a little bit skinny too? Because, like, I don't know. These sleeves aren't made for people with actual arms. Yeah, I got this one because I wanted to see how the face translated on the shirt, you know? If you were to buy this shirt, only get it in black. Because it's not going to look good in anything but black because of the way the print is. Johnny. All right. So if anyone else has a story they would like me to read, like a favorite story of theirs, one they like to hear, whatever the case may be, Feel free to send me a DM on Discord with a link to it, or send me a message on Twitter with a link to it, and I will be happy to read it. If you do send me one, tag my name on here, and so I will be more likely to see the message. And in the meantime, I will be right back. I have to go use the bathroom. I apologize. Be sanitary. Wash your hands after you use the bathroom. Or at least use sanitizer. I'm using hand sanitizer right now. Well, I mean, if you got to go, yeah, thanks for stopping by, Aries. I appreciate that. I have no idea why my tablet went off. I have legs that go on for days. Thank you, Johnny. They actually only go up to my ass, though, oddly enough. Bye, Aries. Thank you for coming by. Thanks for hanging out for a while. All right, I'm going to find another story to read. Here we go. This one is for Jack, because Jack missed last week. So this one's called Jack's Back. I first got in contact with Jack, my former landlord, a little over a year ago when I answered his newspaper ad. I was in a rush to move out as I had just broken up with my significant other, whom I shared an apartment with, and Jack was renting out the furnished basement of his house. The location was good and the price was a steal, and I moved in with just a few boxes of personal items 4 days later. The house was old and the floors were creaky. Wait a minute. Okay, the house was old and the floors were creaky. Jack was the eternal bachelor, interested in nothing but cars, certainly not interior decorating or hardly even basic upkeeping for that matter. And when he got up to go to work at 5 a.m., he would often wake me up, since I am a fairly light sleeper. However, as the months passed by, I got accustomed to waking up early. I can't tell you the exact moment I realized that something wasn't right. Over a number of days, a thought slowly crept into my conscious mind and settled. I hadn't heard very much noise from upstairs lately. There was the occasional creak or bang, like in all older houses, but the heavy footsteps that I woke up to and sometimes heard during the evening had seemed to disappear completely. Perhaps Jack was sick, I thought. Perhaps he hadn't worked in a few days. Perhaps he worked different hours. The man was a real loner and kept to himself, so it honestly didn't seem strange to me. I only really talked to him when I went upstairs to give him his rent money on the first of every month. He was never unfriendly or rude, but short with me. Didn't have much to say. Man, you got M&Ms? Bastard. I looked out the window and saw that the light was on in the garage. The blinds were closed, but someone was moving around in there. Jack must be working on his car. I felt relieved. His car was his baby, a powerhouse customized from scratch in the body of a 1930 Ford. He'd shown it to me once. It was still just barely drivable, but he had already won prizes. He spent all his free time working on it. The last couple of days, the truck that he drove to work had been sitting in the driveway when I left in the morning, but the following day it was gone. That same evening, the new noises started. It was around 5 p.m. I was on my computer when from upstairs I heard what I could only be described as shuffling, like something covered in cloth was being dragged across the floor on short bursts. Then the sound of something heavy, like a big dresser being moved. More shuffling. I heard the phone ring multiple times, but nobody picked it up. A few minutes later, I could hear Jack slam the front door shut and walk towards the garage. As he passed by my window, I looked outside. Now, I have to say that Jack was not a man who cared a great deal about the way he looked. His hair was gray and disheveled. His clothes often had holes and oil stains, and I had never seen him even remotely close to clean shaven. But this was different. There was something unnerving about his gait, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly was wrong. Arms hanging at his side, he was looking up at the sky. I couldn't see his face, but for a moment it looked like his mouth was wide open. Was that his tongue bulging out, swollen and black? No, of course not. It couldn't be. I closed the curtains and locked my door. Never before had Jack frightened me. That night, I woke up from screaming upstairs. Not frightened screams or calls for help, but angry. A man's voice, loud, shouting in rage. I couldn't make out any words. Was it Jack? I stumbled out of bed and fumbled around in the dark for my clothes, not really knowing what to expect. I looked around for something to defend myself with and grabbed a knife from the kitchen. With shaking hands, I called the police on my cell, ran upstairs, and beat my fist against the door. But there was no answer. The house was dark and silent. Jack's truck was there in the driveway, cold, sleeping. After a little while, a police patrol drove by, and I talked to the officers briefly in the driveway. But they left after looking around outside and not finding anything out of the ordinary. Useless cops. So useless. I turned around, and the house loomed in front of me like only houses in the dark can. I thought I saw movement behind a curtain. After an hour or so, I crawled back into bed. I didn't sleep. I just laid there, quiet as a mouse in the dark with my covers up to my eyeballs, listening for any noise or movement upstairs. There was only silence. Thankfully, I was not scheduled to work the next day. It was late summer and a lovely day, but I was afraid to go outside. I didn't hear Jack all day. However, the phone rang multiple times and nobody picked up. I spent the day with millions of thoughts running through my head, jumping at every little sound the house produced, kitchen knife never out of reach. Had there been a knock on my door that day, I would probably have suffered a fatal heart attack. Nightfall brought a sense of despair. I didn't see anyone walking by my window that evening, but through my curtains I saw lights come through in the garage. I started to wonder whether I was losing my mind. Sleep came late, and when it did, it was filled with terrible dreams. It was one of those long nightmares that you never really seem to be able to get out of. In my dream, Jack was standing by my bed looking down at me. I remember his face, foreign, cold, filling me with a deep feeling of dread. And then something had roused me from my sleep. I looked up, and that lingering feeling of dread escalated into a paralyzing fear, violently wedging an icy spear into my spine. Because for a few terrifying seconds, Jack was right there, mouth open so impossibly wide like a ghostly image burned in my retinas from looking into a bright light. I screamed, and the vision faded away. Just then, as if something upstairs had heard me scream, a response came in the form of a heavy thump. Something rolled across the floor. I think I cried. Looking back, I think that was a turning point for me. Everything about this was so wrong, and I couldn't continue letting this happen, whatever it was. I needed to not be scared anymore. This needed to end. When dawn finally came, after what seemed like an eternity, I looked outside and felt my heart skip a beat when I saw something moving around the lit garage. This was it. It had to happen now. I need to know the truth. I grabbed my trusty kitchen knife and climbed out my bedroom window, which was not visible from the garage. Crouching, I sneaked around the front door and held my breath as I turned the smudged brass knob. It wouldn't budge. The door was locked. It is possible to be both relieved and disappointed. Wait, is it possible to be both relieved and disappointed at once? My sweaty hand tightened around the handle of the knife as I went around the side of the house. Adrenaline was coursing through my veins, eyes in the back of my head like a startled deer. Please do not let him see me. Please do not let him see me. The kitchen window was open. It was open. I still remember every terrible detail so clearly. After picking together the last bits of courage I could muster, I stood up and looked inside. The fluorescent light over the sink was on. I could see that the refrigerator door was slightly ajar. Then the smell, that awful, disgusting stench wafting out through that window slit. And there, on the floor, next to the broken dishes, God help me. I didn't go back inside. I didn't stay. I drove away, and I called the police from my car. I didn't want to gamble on that thing, whatever it was, staying put in the garage until the police arrived. I drove until I was too tired to drive any further. Then I pulled in on the side of the road and slept. I never went back to that house. A few days later, I found the article in the local newspaper. It stated that a 58-year-old man had been found dead in his home on 112 and Dunsmuir. Cause of death was unknown. An autopsy was going to be performed. Foul play had been ruled out, however. The coroner estimated that the man had been dead for about 3 weeks before he was found by his tenant. It also spoke of some unusual findings around the property, especially in the unattached garage. But I didn't read any further. The worst part is, sometimes when I wake up, I still see Jack standing beside my bed, draped like a blanket over something far more dark and sinister. Oh, apparently this one was written by Little Pangolin. I'm hungry. All right, this one is called Sister's Sinister Shower. She was beautiful. She had a great face, great body, and her hair. Goodness gracious, her hair. It was so silky, long, and so absolutely perfect. The entire school knew this. She knew it. Her younger sister did too. I must be a good younger sister, she would tell herself, but even then she would occasionally startle herself with some of the especially ill thoughts towards her older sister. It isn't that she didn't love her. In fact, her hatred towards her is made that much more ferocious because of her love for her. Soon, though, her mounting jealousy would reach a critical mass. They would fight, just as they have done countless times before. They would fight and screech and throw and break until both are emotionally drained. She would apologize first, just as always, and they would make up, and after so much time, repeat the sad cycle. This time, however, they will not fight. This time, as the cancer in her heart was just about ready to burst, she met him. She was smitten. She must have him, but how? Her sister would have no trouble, that's it. She knew exactly what she needed to do. She decided that she would grow her hair and take care of it, just as her older sister would. She would make herself beautiful for him, and she would win him and finally get some peace of mind after living all these years in the shadow of her ever so perfect older sister. Summer break arrived, and she stopped cutting her hair. Every day she took painstaking care of it. She would lather a series of expensive mineral-rich shampoos into her scalp, making a semicircular motions with her hands. She would then slowly move down and wash the entire length, all the way to the tips. Every day it grew a little bit longer. When the summer finally gave way to fall, her hair was long and silky and startlingly beautiful, radiant even. It was as beautiful, if not more so, than her older sister's. School started, and she was anxious. Surely, after everything I've done, he'll notice me and fall for me in a heartbeat. The wind was blowing through her hair, and the boys were already murmuring. She changed. Look at her, gorgeous. She pretended to be bashful, looking to the side as the mob of boys made their way towards her. She was about to try and get her crush's attention when he gently nudged her out of the way and made a beeline for her older sister standing a couple of meters behind her. She had spent the entire summer slaving her hair, and her sister took the spotlight yet again because sister, the pretty and perfect sister, had to get a pair of fucking glasses. They had been dating for 2 weeks now. She had been brooding for 2 weeks now. This isn't right. No, not by a long shot. This just won't do at all. All these years, all that greedy bitch does is take like the voracious pig spawn she is. What gives her the right? No, this just will not do at all. This time, she will not take. She will give. She will give me her place in the spotlight. There it is. Sorry, I lost my spot. She will give me the boy. She will give me all her stupid pretty clothes. She will give me everything. I'll kill her. I'll fucking kill her. And when my love, for fuck's sake, not hers, shows up at the funeral and sees me grieving because my sister committed suicide, then he'll comfort me. And then he will love me. And she will be dead, cold and dead, and long gone to a place where only the worms will marvel at her fucking hair before it falls out of her head and shrivels into dust. Sister, help me study for final exams. Sister, come up to the roof of the school and let's clear our heads. Sister, why don't we climb over the fence and sit on the ledge? I love you. Give me a hug, sister. Oh, how I love you. Oh, how the whole world loves you. You landed face up. One of the lens popped out of your glasses, but both of your legs are snapped back at the knees, and it looks kind of like a W, and still, you're so beautiful. Even now, you're an angel, and the blood pooling around your head is your halo. Goodbye, sister. It's my turn to be happy now. She is so beautiful. She has a great face, great body, and her hair. Goodness gracious, her hair. It's so silky, long, and so absolutely perfect. Excuse me. Did you hear about her sister? I heard she killed herself out of jealousy. I heard she was bitter about her beautiful younger sister and threw herself from the roof of the school. How selfish, how stuck up. An older sister should know better. She'd been dating him for about a year now. She's also been lauded the prettiest girl in the whole school for about a year now. In the public light, she fits her role like a glove, and she loves every second of it. She never felt guilt. She was too busy feeling entitled to everything she got to feel guilty. She was a child who had yet to lose interest in a shiny new toy. In many ways, this was the happiest year of her life. However, she started to gradually hate showering more and more, and it only got worse with every passing day. She still took a great deal of time and effort in order to maintain her hair, but every minute she spent in the shower, she felt nervous. She felt jittery. It only gets worse when she had to close her eyes and rub that expensive shampoo into her hair. It's been just about a year now, and she's decided that enough is enough. Why does she need to waste so many hours of her life making her hair perfect? Why does she have to put herself through this anxiety? The reason for her growing her hair out in the first place is probably hairless, if not fleshless by now. So to hell with it. You're fucking dead. Cold and dead, she spat. She reached for the kitchen knife and sliced her hair so that it fell just above her shoulders. She felt like a great weight had been lifted from her back. What a relief. For the first time in what felt like ages, she had been panic-free day. She went shopping, had coffee with her boyfriend, and then headed home for a nice, relaxing shower. She closed her eyes and lathered her hair, rubbing her fingers deep into her scalp. She sighed with relief and slowly made circular motions with each hand, moved down the back of her head. Soon, she was just like old times, washing the hair that went past her shoulder blades. and just like old times, feeling that dreadful panic spring into her heart. She had cut her hair, she was sure of it. She threw that horrible, frightful, and beautifully silky hair into the trash bin that was taken out and emptied in the morning. Yet here she was, washing her hair in spite of her growing sense of dread building up in the pit of her stomach. She was shaking hard and felt cold in spite of the warm water. She felt oh so cold, as if the blood was flowing out of the back of her head. Slowly she looked up. Her legs were snapped back at the knees and looked like a W. No blood pooled around her head, though. She just dripped. It dripped and dripped and plinked and plonked into little sister's forehead while she lathered and lathered and lathered her dead sister's beautiful hair. Alrighty. Oh, you could totally do that, Jack. It was what was it? Where is it? Sister's Sinister Shower. This one is called Camera Shy. Camera Shy. No problem. Yeah, all these ones are Creepypasta Indexer. It says the original author of this one is SWAT Theory. Camera Shy by SWAT Theory. I worked at a recently built city parking garage and transit hub, and late at night, it's my job to lock everything up until the morning and patrol the dark building alone with just a radio linked to the local police department. It's a very simple procedure that takes maybe 10 minutes to lock up everything, with 15-minute walkthroughs every hour. At roughly 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm very tired from my 8-hour shift with 4 more hours to go. I dragged myself through the security center, fancy talk for a room with a chair and monitors, and began my ascent through the ramps. I listened to my footsteps echo and realized it seemed quieter than usual. I could smell the typical putrid smell of the city, of the fermenting feces and the trash can from the numerous homeless from the area using the trash bins. We had to lock down the public bathrooms to prevent damage, theft, vandalism, and most importantly, deaths from people overdosing in there in the middle of the night. I finally got to the top floor and summoned the elevator. I placed my forehead against the door, feeling the cold air rushed up through the elevator shaft as it reached my floor with a satisfying ding. I stepped, got to the ground floor, and continued back to the office. I fling the door open and head inside, running for the cold office room and using my magnet fob to unlock the door. The door usually gets hung up a little, so with a swift heel, I slammed it shut and make my way to my desk. The computer that runs the cameras is worthy of being called ancient. I'm pretty sure they don't even make them anymore. Not to mention the internet the cameras run off of is so slow they take forever to update. So I sat there with my new favorite pastime, watching myself walk around with a tremendous amount of lag time. I sat there watching myself drudge on through stupidly hot weather. I laughed to myself as I watched my head land against the cold steel of the top floor elevators. As the doors open, the light floods the area around me. My blood went ice cold. There was a man standing no more than 6 feet away, just staring at me. As I entered the elevator, he headed for the stairs. Already vaulting down the steps, my heart races as I watch each camera as he hits each floor I hit. The fourth, the third. Almost seamlessly, he kept perfect time with the elevator. My ears begin to boil as I feel all the blood rush to my head. I'm having a hard time breathing. I watch as the elevator doors close and it begins following me again, getting closer and closer after each turn of the corner. I watch as I fling open the door and he catches it, heading in right behind me. My heart pounding in my eardrums. He's inside the building. I keep watching, knowing I should look away. I can't find him. Then I see why. I kick the door shut in his face, which means as I search the room, I eventually discover it's just me in there. I radio for a few officers to come in. They sweep the building, give me a slap on the wrist for not paying attention, and left. The rest of the night, I stayed in that room. I watched each camera diligently, but never saw him again. Now, every time I go to work, I can never shake the feeling that I'm being watched. Haley. This one is called Gunpowder Hill. Unknown author. During a period from 1946 to 1952 in a small town in western Germany, the residents heard what resembled a six-gun salute on the 15th March. On the 15th of March every year, some residents made frequent trips into the surrounding hills in hopes to find the source of the noise, but to no avail. The townsfolk eventually coined the area as Gunpowder Hill. The children of the town even created a legend about it, stating that soldiers who in that time were missing but presumed dead had been killed in an execution-style massacre, and were buried somewhere in the hill. The purpose of the six-gun salute was to guide people to the location of the men. On the 15th of March every year, the children would gather at the edge of town, eagerly awaiting the six-gun shots to be heard. In late 1951, the hills on the outskirts of the small German town were surveyed for the future construction of a NATO military site. The military base was to consist of a series of deep underground bunkers and weapon supplies in case of a Soviet invasion occurred. In February of 1952, construction began. Just 4 weeks later, the crew began digging a massive 200-foot deep hole for the future underground storage bunkers. It was during this time that the crew made a morbid discovery. As they neared the end of the digging operation, a human hand was seen sticking out of the bottom of the hole. Upon further examination, 27 bodies were discovered at the bottom of the 200-foot deep hole, dressed in prisoner of war uniforms worn by the Allies in Nazi war camps. A NATO officer ordered for the bodies to be exhumed immediately. As the medical team slowly carried out the bodies, they looked on in puzzlement. The bodies were remarkably well preserved. Furthermore, the POW uniforms bore a strange insignia which was unlike any the men had seen before, an orange circle with a single black dash in the middle. However, the most unsettling characteristic were the faces of the men who were exhumed. Their eyes were wide open and their mouths were sealed shut with an unknown adhesive. The bodies were then dispatched to the local morgue for immediate identification and autopsies. That night, the local mortician began his work. However, he found it difficult to concentrate on his task. The eyes of the first man he was beginning to work with seemed to be staring back at the mortician from the autopsy table. He shook his head and just rationalized the sight as the imaging of his overactive mind. The mortician took his scalpel and began his first cut on the body's chest. Blood poured out of the incision with staggering force. The mortician backed away from the table in shock. The red liquid began running down the table, pooling on the floor below. The eyes of the body began watering, and streaks of tears ran down his face. Soon, the eyes rolled back into the body's head, and the bleeding ceased. In horror, the mortician began to make his way into the door on the verge of nausea, but not before catching a glance at the 26 other bodies laying on separate tables. Their eyes looked back at the doctor with tangible fear. The men were still alive. You think I should do a Q&A? Ask me some questions. I will answer questions. That sucks you're getting sick, Boogeyman. Would I like the red toilet paper or the blue? I will take the red toilet paper mixed with the blue. Give me purple toilet paper, Johnny. I want purple toilet paper. 2-ply. At least. Keep thinking of dirty joke questions, huh? Does anyone even notice a difference in this thing being on my mic? Can anyone tell if there's any sort of different sound or anything? Well, if nobody wants to ask me any questions, hey, thank you. Then I will read another story. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Please share, because I'll probably be here for at least 2 or 3 more stories. So yeah, I found it the other day because I didn't used to use it on there. Hey, what up, Wolfpack Woodcraft? Yeah. Yeah, I just have. When did you get here, Corey? Did you just get here or have you been here? 'Cause that's the first time I've seen you say something. Oh, okay. I was about to say, like, man, have you been here or what? All right, I'm going to get to reading another story if nobody has any questions for me. Got to find another one. I'll probably do this one. Maybe I'll do a Q&A next week. Give people a little bit of time. You freaking better not be kidnapped tonight, Haley. What the hell you mean someone walking out of your deck outside? Better break a guitar over someone's head or something. All right, this one's called Do Try by Creepypasta Index. Let me look at the bottom and see if it says the real author. Nope, there's no known author here. I found this shit on my porch one night. Fucking ding-dong ditch or whatever. A little baggie with 2 blue capsules and a stupid note with 2 words. Do try. I figured it was some shitty prank from my experimental friends from down the street. We've tried nearly every reasonable drug there is, trying to get the most psychedelic trips, maintain the best highs, DMTs, acid, some experimental shit this dude sold me from for way too much. Shit fucked me up. I tripped. I was dust floating down from the ceiling. Lasted like 8 hours. Fucked me up. Anyway, the pill had like an orange 17 on them. Looked them up online and couldn't find anything. I threw it on my dresser and crashed for the night. I called my friends the next afternoon. They all claimed they had nothing to do with it. Wasn't them. I figured one of them would fess up eventually. Over the next week, I pretty much forgot about it. None of my friends said anything, so either they forgot or it really wasn't them. I didn't feel like mentioning it. We had some concentrated salvia, so we lit that up. The next day, curiosity killed me. I picked up the bag, glanced at the note again. Do it. I swore it said do try, but I was high when I picked it up, so I don't know. But I was intrigued me even more. I examined the pill. I reasoned with myself. I just couldn't take it. It could be anything, but I was so curious. What if it was the best high, the most psychedelic trip? I talked myself out of it. I set it down again, and I couldn't help but feel like I was missing out. The next few days were hell. I had a fever, and I felt like literal shit. Probably strep. I slept most of the day, but I awoke to the sound from my own heartbeat. My thoughts went instantly to the pill. I picked it up. It was practically calling my name. What the fuck did I have to lose? If I die, I die. I felt like dying anyway. For all I know, it could be some fucking antibiotics. I hope for the latter. I looked at it one last time. I downed it. I remember waking up. The world was in negative. I was strapped to a chair, and these dark, pulsating lights were eating away at my vision. I had no idea what was going on, but I wasn't scared. I was used to fucked up trips, but this was different. I felt empty. Time was moving backwards. Light was inverted. These dark lamps pulsing energy through my brain. A bass tone vibrating my body. I couldn't close my eyes. I needed these lights. They were blackening the world, my world, the world where I resided and wasted time in the light. I finally understood. I was in the dark. I started seeing the figures after what seemed like an eternity. Black masses of energy crawling towards me from every angle. I was seeing them in strobe. As the dark flashed, they crept closer and closer, and I recognized them as friend. They were to free me from the light, take me away from this white hell we all know so well. I wanted to go to them, but I made no attempt. I focused on the strobe. I needed them to move faster, to rid me of luminescence once and for all. The strobe frequently slowed. Time started to speed up. The figures were stationary. The light was coming. My corneas burnt as the trip wore off. My emptiness enveloped me. The strobe was near out. The figures no longer visible. I finally closed my eyes. Such a pale dark compared to true darkness. When I opened them, I was in my bed. I shut them back immediately. I hated light, hated our world. I wanted nothing more than return to the chair. I couldn't live here anymore. I couldn't open my eyes. I reasoned with myself for hours to get up, to open my eyes. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I didn't. I prayed for darkness. It meant nothing. I was in the white. The only way I knew to return to the black was the pill. I had one left, but I had to open my eyes. My luminous mind was telling me it was just a trip. Don't go back, forget the abyss, and return to normal life. The darkness was in favor. I didn't want to go back. I needed it. It was the realization the world needed, but I didn't care about the world. Only dark. Night came. I finally opened my eyes, not to let the light in, but to get the pill, the last pill. As far as I knew, it was the last pill on Earth. My want for the darkness convinced me that I only needed one. The figures would take me this time. I would forsake the light for the wondrous dark. I cared not what was in the dark, as long as it was unlit. My body was weak, my eyes so adjusted to our world's pathetic darkness as I felt as though I was looking at the sun. I needed the eclipse. I grabbed the bag and without hesitation swallowed the capsule. I would be home soon. I closed my eyes. I awoke. I was back, again in the chair. The dark was so comforting. Time moved the way I remembered, my frail body energized by the tones, the strobe showing me truths. The darkness was truth. I waited for the figures. I was confident they would take me this time. Finally, they limped into view. I praised them. Every strobe showed promise that I would soon forget light. Their movements were choppy and slow, but promising. I urged them closer, watching intently between strobes for their presence. They were getting close. I could feel them. Their pulses heavy on my chest, our hearts beating in unison with the strobes. They were here. The saviors were. What? The saviors had arrived. They circled me, crippled creatures that would transform my world. They opened my eyes to the dark and closed them to the light. They held out their hands as the strobe slowed to a near stop. Everything was speeding up. I thought they took me. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, I was in complete darkness. Beautiful, astonishing darkness. Every direction an endless abyss of void of light. This is what I had prayed for, where I belonged. I never had to see light again. To open my eyes to anything but black was impossible. I loved it. I got up to walk around my uncontaminated world, the dark Eden. I stumbled over something in the void. I felt around. This overwhelming darkness contained something familiar. My old world. The pills made him blind. Welcome back, Terrence. What the hell, Haley? Is everything all right? Maybe you should like grab a knife so you can shank the shit out of somebody if need be. This one's called The Patron Saint of the Good-Looking Corpse. The original author is the Silicon Lemming. The Patron Saint of the Good-Looking Corpse. Come in, friend, and take a seat. My name? Call me Jack. I run this establishment. I've been working this bar for the better part of 100 years. Got a nice stage. We got entertainment later if you're sticking around. Well, do you have time for a drink? Okay. What was that? The 100 years thing? Yeah, friend. I'm a little older than I look. I'm a demon. I can tell from your expression that you've never bumped into one of us before. We do exist. I guarantee that by the end of this conversation, I'll have swung your opinion. Don't worry, I'm not a threat. Hardly good for business. And my business is important to me. On that stage, you'll see some of the best talent in the biz. I consider myself a talent scout without equal. I specialize in contracts for fame and fortune. I can give the lucky individuals 10 years of their dreams and then come to collect. In return, they play at my club for the rest of eternity. They almost never think twice. One catch, though. I can only make this deal with them once they are 17. I don't know why. I don't make the rules. Who do I have? You'll probably know a few of them. The first guy I signed was something really special. Created an entire genre by himself. Kid by the name of Robert. A real demon on the guitar. If you'll pardon the pun, it seems everyone and his brother knew about our deal, though. Yeah, the crossroad thing. Well, I did make subject easier when I was talking to later pitches. Thing with Robert is he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready to give it up when I came to collect, so I had to grease the wheels, so to speak. Stringent poisoning can be incredibly painful, so I hear. This is the thing. They're happy for the trade at 17, but the moment they hit 27, it starts to consume them. It becomes all they think about. Some will use it to drive them to write as much as they can. Others will try to use it as many Others will try to use as many distractions as possible not to think about it. Drugs, alcohol, women, the good things in life. Need a refill there, champ? This one guy, Kurt, now he surprised me. He worked out how to summon me against my will, I might add. Yanked me right into his goddamn front room, just as I'm about to give the shaggy-haired fool a piece of my mind. He pulls out a shotgun and says that he's breaking the deal. Blew his brains out right in front of me. I mean, come on. The deals are binding. Killing yourself just gets you here faster. I'm a fucking demon. My kind invented fine print. Another cat, I should mention his name is Jimmy. He was a rare one, I tell you. The kid was tripping so hard when he got here. It took us a week to convince him he was dead. All he cared about was as long as he had his guitar to play. Now he plays every Friday night, packs the place out every time. What? Oh, come on. I've worked hard for them, and now they work hard for me. This bar is something I take pride in. I have some of the best entertainment in the world, and here I showcase it to any who know how to get here. You don't remember how you got here? Yeah, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Something tells me you've got a little more free time than you realize. Fancy another drink? Well, that was that story. Everything better be okay. All right, Corey. I don't even, you might not even be here anymore, but I hope you have a good night, man. Thanks for stopping in. I appreciate it. How late am I going tonight? I don't even know, man. I'll read a couple more. I'll read one more kind of longer story. All right. And then I'll call it a night, probably. All right, man. You have a good one. Thanks for stopping in, Corey. I appreciate it. All right. I don't think I've read this one before. It's called My Wife by Mr. Penji. My life seemed like it was going pretty well. I had just received my bachelor's degree at the state college and received a fairly well-paying job as an office manager. Thing is, something felt like it was missing from my life. I wanted love. I wanted to have a wife to keep me company, but the only women I knew worked at the office and were drop dead ugly. After coming home one evening from a long day at work, I grabbed a Coke, sat down, and booted up my computer. I was very desperate to find love as soon as possible, and it seemed my only choice was to find it through online dating. I visited a popular website, registered, and set up my interest in the hopes that I'd be matched soon. The next morning, I woke up and turned the computer on once more. I noticed that there was a total of only 2 matches, and strangely enough, one of the 2 was a drop dead ugly coworker. The other had no profile picture, but the name was unfamiliar. Knowing how desperate I was, I took a chance and private messaged this girl, asking her to meet up at a local cafe that night. The person replied back about 3 minutes later, saying okay. I was very excited, but at the same time anxious to see how this would go. That night, I was bitterly exhausted from a tremendous amount of work I had at the office, but my excitement overpowered it as quickly as I got home. Changed, and drove off to the cafe. The cafe was only a quick 5 minutes from my house, so driving was no problem at all. I had no trouble parking. As soon enough, I was inside, ready to see my blind date. To my utter astonishment, the most beautiful girl I had ever seen in my life approached me. Her most prominent features were her eyes, most gorgeous gray eyes in the world. "Hi," she said, smiling. "I'm Christy. You must be David. I saw your picture online." "I sure as heck didn't see yours," I said as we shared a laugh. I could tell already we were meant to be. Our first date turned out great, and as it turns out, we did indeed have a lot in common. As I dropped her off at her shabby apartment building, we partook in our first kiss, and I left. At this point, I felt like the luckiest guy in the world, like nothing could go wrong now. Christy and I dated for only 4 months before I proposed to her, and she said yes with great excitement. Our wedding went like most, but there was a desolate turn of people. The members of the audience included my mother, Christy's father, a couple of my close co-workers, and a few of her close friends. She was just so wonderful, and I was just so in love. That night, I lost my virginity with her, but luckily she didn't get pregnant because having a child this early in our marriage wouldn't be too good. I wasn't financially able. I wasn't financially able to afford a honeymoon, but she thought it was all right, and being with each other was all that mattered. She was just so nice like that. And in place of that, I helped her move her things into my humble home where we would be living together. Our life together was going by so nicely. We were the perfect team. A few months later, I learned at work that one of the coworkers who attended my wedding, Kevin, was found dead with cuts all over his body. It was unidentified who did this or what happened. They told me they were going to medically examine him in a few days. This news really brought me down, and it made the headache I already had even worse. I had been getting pretty bad headaches, which I presume had to be from overwork. I got home late that night, and it appeared Christy was already in bed. I wasn't very hungry, so I went into my room to join her. I immediately told her about my friend Kevin, who was being found dead, but she sat up suddenly, looked at me, and smiled, which was quite odd considering the situation, and said, "Don't worry about it. He'll be fine." I wasn't sure whether to be surprised or relaxed at her tone, but given her sweet nature, I just ignored it and went to sleep. The following morning, I woke up sick, coughing very badly, and feeling the urge to vomit. I stayed home from work, which was the only nice part about it, besides the fact of Christy being so caring for me while I was in need. "I love you. Feel better," were the relaxing words spoken to me every so often that day. As night fell, she silently joined me in bed and turned off the lights. About 30 minutes in, I was having trouble sleeping. I wrapped my arm around Christy in an attempt to hold her, but just then my hand froze. I just couldn't move. Her skin was cold as ice. "Christy, are you all right?" I asked, but she didn't respond. I turned her over to reveal my wife, but the most horrific way I could imagine her. I screamed as loud as I possibly could, shoved her away from me, and bolted for the bathroom. What I saw was my Christy with her eyeballs missing, revealing bloodied sockets, skin veined, covered in droopy and pale white skin. I wasn't sure about any other detail because my eyes were not fully adjusted to the darkness. I sat there and cried until I suppose I fell asleep. Surprisingly, I felt refreshed that morning, but I quickly changed into fear as I remembered what I had just seen. My vision was blurred and distorted, most likely due to my excessive amount of crying. I had to push on and overcome the fears I had about whatever I witnessed the night before. I opened the door slowly, making sure I didn't make a sound. As I slowly turned towards the bedroom, I noticed she wasn't there. I heard something coming from the kitchen, metal banging together. I rushed over to check out the scene where I saw my beautiful wife there picking up a pan that she had dropped. As soon as she saw me, she dropped them again. "What the hell happened last night?" she asked, but she sounded more concerned than angry. "I felt like I had to throw up my guts, and so I did," I lied. She took the bait, fortunately. "Oh, well, feel better." She kissed me and went back to cooking up breakfast. My weekend wasn't starting off so great. I contemplated what I had seen, what had just happened. I just couldn't explain it. I tried to think past it, like it would never happen again, but it did. It haunted my dreams. Her lifeless body, her lack of eyes, but the worst part of my nightmares were what it did. Her body would just stand up like a marionette and put its face to mine, sending the odor of rotting flesh into my nostrils. "There's no escape," it whispered coldly. "We will be together forever." It grinned, showing a regular, beautiful smile. That smile now sent shivers down my back. I thought I was going to lose my mind. I saw that thing everywhere. It was hiding behind a cubicle. It was lying down in the park. I was frantic to get away from it, but it just wouldn't stop. I wanted Christy, my Christy, the one I'm in love with, not that ghoul. I knew I needed to end it. The following day, I walked in my house and saw the body standing near the kitchen, slouched over like in my dreams. I didn't take a minute to think before grabbing it and shoving it into the oven, resisting its struggles. I closed the door, turned it on, and although it was painful, I was relieved. The oven began to shake violently and emitting screams which were so pain-filled and horrible to hear. I ran out of the house. The pain-filled screams went on for another 10 minutes or so, and by then my house was filled with a thick wall of black smoke. As I walked back in, the shaking and screaming stopped. The house felt dead, silent, and eerie, like nothing else was alive in the world. I walked up to the oven to examine the remains, and what I pulled out destroyed me even more than anything could have. What I beheld was Christy, my wife, burned beyond return. But strangely, her eyes were completely intact. I fell to my knees, just staring. I couldn't believe this. I was there for 15 minutes, 30, as the police started to show up. They came in and picked me up and, of course, arrested me for being on the scene of the crime. I was put into the room and questioned, but luckily I was able to get my way around their persisting questions. They concluded that I was a husband who got home from work finding a charred remains of my once beloved wife. They told me everything was going to be okay and that I would need to rent a room for a hotel while they inspected. I knew it wasn't going to be all right. I knew what I had done. And you know what's even worse? I still see her. Whatever. I killed her. I killed her. I could never forgive myself. I ruined my life, her life, everyone's. I didn't want to go on, but here I am typing this. So since I wanted to try to go on through my insane desperate depression, I attempted to go to work the next day. As I pulled in and approached the doors, I noticed that there was a yellow caution tape in front with a small note stuck to the door reading, "Building has been condemned from operations until later notice due to chemical exposure creating hazardous work conditions. State Department of Health." I felt chills run down my spine as I read the note. Not knowing what this could mean to me, I decided I needed to get this checked out. I got into my car and sped down the road straight to my doctor. I neared his office and threw the door open, revealing I was the only client there. The nurse escorted me to him and asked if I could test my body for chemical intake. He said yes and agreed to do it. Shortly afterwards, he diagnosed me with disorder caused by the inhalation of a certain chemical. Trembling, I pleaded for him to read the side effects included with the inhalation, and he read that to me. Effects of inhalation or indigestion involve migraines, vomiting, weariness, and is uniquely linked to strange patterns and effects of occurring within the senses. Long-term exposure may result in brain damage, mental instability, and severe hallucinations. Oh, it's your neighbors? Is it your neighbors, Haley? Is that what's going on here? It's your neighbors? Right? Side effects may include death. I've always found that interesting, that to be like, and in some rare cases, death. What? The side effects of medications. They'd be like, may cause vomiting, diarrhea, bloody stool, mass hallucinations, death. In some rare cases, it might actually help the infliction. All right, peoples. I think it's about time I call this one. It's been going on for about... My neighbor's puppy had gotten into my garden through the loose fence panel again, and Ian had just fallen off the deck and into the lilies. He ruined your lilies? Better whoop that ass. All right, everybody. I want to thank everybody for hanging out. I appreciate you coming. If you could like this before we leave, or whatever. Hey, No problem, Johnny, and it's good to see you, Mr. Hiding away from everybody. I ain't seen you in the freaking voice chat or anything forever, it seems like, man. I know I've even tried to call you out a couple times, like, Johnny, where you been, man? Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you have been busy with your 31 days. 31 days of Halloween. Yeah, Haley, you did make it. So did April. But everybody, thank you again. You all have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Whew. Wow, that's crazy, Johnny. 10 to 12 hours a day on videos. Good Lord, my friend. That's too much. All right, though. Y'all have a good night.